Chapter 775. A difficult battle clang. A clear explosion resounded on the floating platform. Under the support of the greater perfection spear intent, a terrifying force erupted from Zhuowen's body, rumbling like a volcanic eruption. The sharp tip of the bone spear pressed against the two air blades in the sky, setting off an endless hurricane that endlessly swept across the entire arena. Rumble! Another explosion resounded, causing Zhuowen's pupils to shrink. The might of the crushing air blades was terrifying. The greater perfection spear intent actually faintly showed signs of collapsing under the pressure of the air blades. "Ha! Break for me!" Huangfu Wudao laughed heartily as his right hand pressed down once again. The terrifying air blades actually expanded a little as they continued to press down, their might increasing by a little. Finally, under Zhuowen's astonished gaze, countless cracks appeared on the surface of the spear intent domain, and the blue crystals that surrounded it crumbled into dust inch by inch. Die! The corners of Huangfu Wudao's mouth were filled with a sinister smile as his right hand pressed down once again. The air blades passed through the cracks of the spear intent domain and rumbled toward Zhuowen's chest with a swoosh. The air blades were extremely terrifying. If Zhuowen were to be struck by them, even if he didn't die, he would lose a layer of skin. Nirvana of the Great Sun! Zhuowen bellowed as a terrifying golden light burst out from his body. After that, it actually transformed into a figure with 3 heads and 6 arms. His figure was over 3 meters tall, and he was extremely mighty and domineering. His 6 arms each held a spear, and every spear emitted a flowing light, showing how extraordinary they were. The 6 arms suddenly waved and instantly formed 6 spear intent domains in front of Zhuowen. The 6 spear intent domains revolved around Zhuowen's body like a shield, surrounding him in the center. Rumble! The air blades instantly arrived and pressed against the 6 spear intent domains. Instantly, an extremely terrifying explosive force erupted. At the same time, Zhuowen wasn't to be outdone. His 6 arms waved the spears and fiercely smashed against the air blades. The terrifying force almost caused the surface of the air blades to violently tremble. Kacha! The chi blade instantly collapsed inch by inch, turning into countless chi forces that completely disappeared in front of Zhuowen. With a stomp of his foot, the terrifying power almost caused the ground to shatter. His entire body was like an arrow leaving the bow as he shot towards another chi blade. His 6 arms once again swung out, smashing onto the second chi blade. The second chi blade couldn't escape the fate of being crushed and completely dissipated into the air. After slowly landing on the ground, Zhuowen raised his head and stared calmly at Huangfu Wudao. He sneered, "Is this the fear of death you said you wanted me to feel? Why don't I feel anything?" As soon as these words were spoken, Huangfu Wudao's eyes narrowed. He'd never imagined that Zhuowen would actually be able to block his energy drill dual blades. Looks like this young man isn't so weak. That was just a small test of my skills. It seems that you do have some skills. Unfortunately, in my opinion, this little skill of yours is still extremely laughable. Since you really want to experience the fear of death so much, I'll fulfill your wish. As he spoke, Huangfu Wudao stomped his foot. Endless chi blades burst out from his body and revolved around his body. His loose robe fluttered in the wind and his long hair danced wildly. His imposing manner was like a rainbow, looking down on the world. In the next moment, Huangfu Wudao disappeared from the sky. When everyone came back to their senses, Huangfu Wudao had already arrived behind Zhuowen at an unknown time. Huangfu Wudao's hands gently moved, and countless chi blades swirled and swept toward Zhuowen's back like a hurricane wrapped in countless blades. So fast! Feeling the strong wind sweeping from behind, Zhuowen's pupils shrank slightly. Huangfu Wudao's speed was so fast that he hadn't even caught sight of Huangfu Wudao's figure before the latter had unknowingly arrived behind him. Ha! With a furious roar, 3 pairs of lightning wings instantly grew out of Zhuowen's back. With a flap of the lightning wings, he turned into an invisible thunderbolt and disappeared on the spot. Bang! The chi blades swept out and smashed into the ground, directly smashing open an enormous pit that was over 10 m in size, and countless rocks flew and spilled out in all directions. As he gazed at the enormous pit, Zhuowen's expression was unsightly. The might of Huangfu Wudao's attack wasn't weak, and if he was struck by it, then even he would be doomed. Your reaction is rather quick. Unfortunately, what's the use of having a quick reaction? You're not a match for me at all, and you'll be unable to escape the fate of death in the end. Huangfu Wudao's face was filled with confidence, as if so long as he made a move, then Zhuowen's life would be taken at will. Right now, the truth is that you didn't take my life. Then what kind of bullshit posture are you putting on there? What kind of bullshit nonsense are you saying? You think you can defeat me because of that? Zhuowen mocked without the slightest trace of politeness. Huangfu Wudao's face froze when he heard this, and then his eyes narrowed to reveal a trace of a dangerous arc. He said indifferently, "Your courage is really admirable. You're clearly at death's door, yet you actually dare to boast so shamelessly." Boast shamelessly? I think it should be you who's boasting shamelessly. You speak as if you've already grasped my life in your hands. In reality, you haven't even been able to harm a single hair on my head, yet you're still feeling good about yourself. What a pitiful person. Huangfu Wudao was too confident, even confident to the point of conceit. Zhuowen couldn't be said to have a good impression of Huangfu Wudao's attitude. The two of them had clearly not fought yet Huangfu Wudao had spoken so boldly and even looked down on everyone. It made it seem as if Zhuowen was simply an insignificant ant in his eyes, and he could capture Zhuowen with a single move. But the truth was that Huangfu Wudao hadn't defeated Zhuowen yet. Even though I haven't grasped it now, but it won't be long. You'll experience exactly how terrifying the terror of death is in a moment. Huangfu Wudao shook his head, and then he took a step forward and flashed toward Zhuowen once more. At this moment, Huangfu Wudao's hands grabbed at the air, and then countless blades of air condensed and transformed into two enormous broadswords in his palms. Swoosh! Instantly arriving before Zhuowen, Huangfu Wudao's right hand slashed down toward Zhuowen's neck. He wanted to directly take Zhuowen's head with this strike. Zhuowen grunted coldly as he swung his right hand, and the bone spear instantly appeared before him. Bang! The broadsword slashed onto the bone spear, and the sound of metal colliding resounded out while countless sparks flew out. Zhuowen felt his right hand sink, and he couldn't help but take a few steps back. You dare to be arrogant before me with such strength? Huangfu Wudao sneered repeatedly as the broadswords in his hands danced about repeatedly. Every move was fatal, and all of them slashed onto Zhuowen's vital points. Fortunately, Zhuowen possessed 3 heads and 6 arms. Not only were his senses and divine sense formidable, even the strength of his body was extremely terrifying. Even though he retreated repeatedly under Huangfu Wudao's attacks, he was still barely able to resist them. Can you still resist the last move? Huangfu Wudao's indifferent voice sounded out as he clapped his hands together, and the 2 broadswords merged into one and actually developed into an enormous blade of air that was tens of meters long. Subsequently, Huangfu Wudao raised both his hands and slashed down without holding back. The terrifying force practically caused the surrounding space to start collapsing, and waves of air slowly spread out towards the surroundings. Rumble! This strike contained the might of the heavens and the earth, and it contained the terrifying strength of Huangfu Wudao's entire body. It was much more terrifying than the previous attacks. Zhuowen's face went pale. He was able to sense the terror of Huangfu Wudao's strike, and he hurriedly stretched out 6 spears and erupted with spear intent to the limit. At the same time, the spiritual energy within his Naiwen palace shot out explosively as he summoned the infinite sword formation, and it revolved around him to form an iron wall. The 6 Dao spear intent domain and the infinite sword formation formed an iron wall. Both of their defenses were extremely abnormal, but it was unknown if they could block Huangfu Wudao's full force strike. Bang! The two collided, and Zhuowen's pupils constricted as he felt a terrifying force approach him. Then he felt his body sink, and his entire body suddenly fell down like a withered leaf. Rumble! A loud explosion resounded as Zhuowen was blasted deep into the ground by the terrifying force, forming a huge pit. Dust filled the air, and it almost obscured the vision of countless people below. What happened? Is Zhuowen dead? Huangfu Wudao's strike just now was so terrifying. I'm afraid Zhuowen will be seriously injured even if he doesn't die. Dust spread out, causing the people below to be unable to see the exact situation on the stage. Huang Fu Wudao's terrifying saber strike from before naturally appeared within their minds, and its might was truly terrifying to the point that even they who were spectators couldn't help but feel a trace of fear and trepidation. Huang Fu Wudao slowly floated in the air with his arms crossed as he looked down indifferently at the deep pit below. Huang Fu Wudao was extremely confident in the strike just now. Zhuan might not die, but it was very likely that he would be injured. On the high platform, the corners of Grand Haohai's mouth revealed a trace of an excited smile as he said to the Azure Emperor, "Your Majesty, the result is very obvious now. Zhuan can't even withstand a single blow from the first prince. The outcome will be clear with a single look." The Azure Emperor nodded with a faint smile on the corners of his mouth. Zhuan's talent and potential are pretty good. Unfortunately, his character is a little stubborn. If he didn't provoke Wu Dao, he wouldn't have suffered like this. Your Majesty is right. However, Wen openly disobeyed Your Majesty's orders and insisted on asking for trouble by challenging the first prince. We must teach this kid a lesson and let him know that he can't disregard the law in the future. Grand Haohai added. Patriarch Grand, what do you mean? The Azure Emperor raised his brows and asked with some interest. This kid will retain his second place on the Azure Emperor leaderboard. As for the earthly marquee token, there's no need to give it to him. Treat it as a punishment for disregarding the law. After all, this kid's character is unyielding and extremely rebellious. It's best not to let such a person possess too much power and military strength. Otherwise, who knows what he will do to threaten the imperial family in the future. When Grand Haohai said this, the smile on the corners of his mouth became even wider, but the coldness in his eyes became even denser. He was very clear that if Zhuan was allowed to possess too many imperial weapons, this kid would definitely take revenge on the three great clans like a mad dog. Chapter 776. Terrifying Hydra. Lu Hantian glared. Gulan Haohai, Feng Tian, and Chao Ji, these three old geezers are truly shameless. They actually publicly suggested stripping Zhuan of his position as a marquis. But Lu Hantian didn't speak. He knew that the authority to decide all of this rested entirely on Emperor Qing, so his gaze stared fixedly at Emperor Qing. Emperor Qing frowned slightly and said indifferently, "The battle to become a marquis was decided by this emperor. Zhuan has the strength to obtain the position of marquis, so how could this emperor not give it to him? Otherwise, wouldn't this emperor become a person that goes back on his word in the future?" Your Majesty Emperor Qing is right. Gulan Haohai and the others didn't dare say anything when they heard Emperor Qing speak like this, and they lowered their heads in agreement, yet they felt slight pity in their hearts. Bang! Countless shattered rocks flew out from the deep pit in the arena, and then a figure in a rather sorry state flashed out from the pit. If one looked carefully, it was precisely the formidable Zhuan. At this moment, Zhuan's clothes were ragged, his hair was disheveled, and his breathing was rapid. Huang Fu Wudao's attack from before wasn't simple, and if Zhuan wasn't wrong, Huang Fu Wudao had grasped the energy of concept as well. Even though this energy of concept wasn't very strong, Huang Fu Wudao's own strength was far more formidable than Zhuan, so the strength he was able to exert was naturally not something Zhuan could compare to. Do you still want to fight? Your strength is truly slightly weak in my opinion. In the sky, Huang Fu Wudao crossed his arms before his chest as he looked down at Zhuan, and the corners of his mouth were covered in a cold smile. That might not be the case. Because you haven't completely defeated me now, and the outcome hasn't been decided yet. Zhuan slowly patted off the dust on his body and spoke extremely calmly. Huang Fu Wudao's brows raised as he looked at Zhuan, who was calm like water, and he was slightly surprised by Zhuan's attitude at this moment. You're rather stubborn, kid. Since you attach so much importance to the result, then I'll give you the result of a miserable defeat. At that time, besides losing, you might even have to pay the price with your life. Huang Fu Wudao shook his head and raised his hands. A terrifying aura flashed out of his body like a volcano, and the surrounding air was like an inverted waterfall that flowed against the current, causing it was an extremely magnificent sight. Come out, Hydra! An indifferent voice resounded through the entire floating platform, sounding so vast and dignified. Were Huangfu Wudao's head, Huangfu Wudao's forehead, and finally transformed into a huge snake's head. As the purple energy continued to gather, snake heads began to appear one after another. Finally, a terrifyingly large 9-headed snake appeared above the floating platform. 9 huge snake heads and 18 pairs of cold eyes stared at Zhuowen below. A bloodthirsty aura spread out from its body. Hydra. The first prince actually used soul armor manifestation. It seems like he plans to defeat Zhuowen in one fell swoop? Perhaps the first prince is tired of the small skirmishes and wants to get rid of Zhuowen completely. Zhuowen has no chance of winning. The power of the Crown Prince's 9-headed Hydra armor soul is terrifying. Ordinary warriors of the Xuanzun realm can't resist it. Looking up at the gigantic 9-headed snake in the sky, everyone's pupils shrank as excitement appeared on their faces. As early as when Huangfu Wudao advanced to the Xuanzun realm, many people had already secretly guessed the true appearance of the soul armor on his body. Now, the truth was finally revealed. Zhuowen's gaze turned extremely grave as he looked at the gigantic 9-headed Hydra floating in front of Huangfu Wudao. After all, the 9-headed Hydra was an extremely powerful primordial beast from ancient times. It was an existence comparable to a mid-level true dragon, and its power was extremely terrifying. Huangfu Wudao leaped onto the 9-headed Hydra's body and looked down at Zhuowen from above. I am from the Xuanzun realm and already possess the ability to use soul armor manifestation. You are merely a half-step into the Xuanzun realm. What are you going to use to compete with me? No matter what you think, you have already lost this battle the moment you started to provoke me. And the price of losing was extremely heavy. Now have a taste of fear. 9 heads, kill this kid. The 9-headed Hydra roared and suddenly rushed toward Jun. Its speed soared to the limit as its 9 heads spewed out a terrifying purple mist at the same time. This purple mist was the poison that the 9-headed Hydra itself carried, and its toxicity could be said to be extremely terrifying. Before the 9-headed Hydra arrived, 9 streams of purple liquid had already shot out from its head and swept toward Jun. With a stomp of his foot, Zhuowen relied on the terrifying speed of his 3 pairs of lightning wings to barely dodge the 9 streams of purple poison. This. As soon as the purple poison landed on the ground of the floating platform, its terrifying corrosive power directly penetrated it. For a moment, the surface of the floating platform was filled with holes and looked extremely disheveled. What a terrifying poison! Zhuowen could not help but suck in a breath of cold air when he saw the poisonous liquid that instantly pierced through the stage. The corrosive power of this poisonous liquid was a little too terrifying. It actually pierced through such a thick floating stage. Zhuowen was unable to imagine what would happen to him if he was stained by this purple poison. Swoosh! Just when Zhuowen was secretly shocked by the terrifying corrosive power of the purple poison, the sound of the sky being torn apart flashed over, and then an enormous serpent tail swung toward Zhuowen with whistling sounds of the wind. The serpent tail was extremely swift to the point Zhuowen didn't even have the time to dodge, and he knew that he could only meet it head-on. 6 spears suddenly danced out and transformed into 6 spear intent domains before him that suddenly blasted towards the serpent tail. Rumble! The 2 of them collided. Instantly, Zhuowen's attack was actually like paper and couldn't withstand a single blow and was instantly broken apart. Puchi! Zhuowen spat out a mouthful of fresh blood as he was once again struck onto the ground of the arena, smashing open a deep human-shaped hole. Ha! Too weak, truly too weak. You actually dare vainly attempt to provoke this lord with such lowly strength? You're truly courting death. Huangfu Wudao laughed wildly as the ridicule on his face grew denser, and he hurriedly commanded the 9-headed Hydra beneath him to continue attacking Zhuowen. Another serpent tail swept heavily towards the deep human-shaped hole Zhuowen was in. With a rumble, it directly smashed open an even deeper hole in the deep hole. Rumble! Rumble! Under Huangfu Wudao's command, the serpent tail continuously smashed into the deep hole, causing the originally small hole to actually continuously expand and deepen, and Zhuowen's figure was nowhere to be seen. How ruthless! The nine-headed Hydra's strength is so great that Zhuowen simply can't withstand many hits. These few hits will absolutely take Zhuowen's life. Looking at the enormous serpent tail that was waving like rain, the pupils of the countless cultivators below the arena constricted slightly, and they secretly prayed for Zhuowen in their hearts. They were clearly aware of how terrifying the nine-headed Hydra's strength was. It was an enormous strength that was enough to shatter mountains and split rocks. It was enough for a human cultivator to be struck once, but now Zhuowen was in the deep hole and was being continuously whipped by the nine-headed Hydra's tail. They were afraid that Zhuowen would be directly turned into meat paste under the snake's tail's lash. Zhuowen is finished. Everyone shook their heads and sighed. Even if Zhuowen's life was tough enough to survive, it was likely that he would be completely crippled. How could this child possibly remain unscathed after enduring such a terrifying force? The smile on Grand Haohai's face became even more brilliant. He was naturally extremely happy that Huangfu Wudao could kill Zhuowen for him. After all, Zhuowen was a potential threat. This is the final blow. If you're still alive, then take it well and enjoy this rare final moment before your death. Huangfu Wudao stood on the nine-headed Hydra with a cruel smile on the corners of his mouth. He then waved his right hand. The nine-headed Hydra roared and raised its huge tail high before finally smashing it down heavily. For a moment, endless terrifying hurricanes swept across the entire suspended platform. The terror of this blow was beyond everyone's expectations. Rumble! The snake's tail smashed into the deep hole and a terrifying force almost spread across the entire suspended platform. Then, everyone below could clearly see dense cracks beginning to appear on the surface of the huge suspended platform. Moreover, these cracks were spreading at an extremely terrifying speed. In the end, the huge suspended platform directly collapsed under the nine-headed Hydra's final blow. Bang! 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 Countless large and small rocks fell from the suspended platform like a storm. It was an extremely spectacular sight. What a terrifying force! Even the suspended platform couldn't withstand the nine-headed Hydra's final blow and directly collapsed. Everyone's faces were moved as they watched the suspended platform continuously collapse. Their eyes were filled with intense shock. Zhuowen is dead for sure. Glen Haohai finally smiled, and his smile was even more brilliant. Everyone was well aware of how powerful the nine-headed Hydra's attack was. No matter how heaven-defying Zhuowen was, it would be very difficult for him to survive under such a terrifying force. Chao Ji and Feng Tian smiled as well. Zhuowen was a thorn in their side. Now that they could borrow Huangfu Wudao's hand to completely eliminate him, the two of them were naturally rather happy. Lu Hantian's face changed drastically. Just as he was about to leap forward to help Zhuowen, he was stopped by three figures. Glen Haohai, Feng Tian, and Chao Ji circled around Lu Hantian and said with a fake smile, "The battle on the stage is a battle between juniors. As a senior, Lu Hantian, you have no right to interfere. You three old bastards, get out of my way." Lu Hantian shouted furiously. He wanted to block the three of them, but an even more powerful aura suddenly burst out and suppressed him. Lu Hantian's eyes widened as he looked at Lu Hantian. "Your Majesty Emperor Qing?" Lu Hantian gritted his teeth and said, "Only the Emperor Qing's aura could have such a terrifying deterrent force." Lu Hantian, this emperor's patience is not that good. Seniors like you are not allowed to interfere in the battle on the stage. You have already crossed this emperor's bottom line many times. Don't think that this emperor won't punish you, the Emperor Qing said coldly. Lu Hantian's face turned ugly when he heard this. However, his face was filled with unwillingness. How could he watch Zhuowen die in front of him? Boom! Chapter 777. Intense battle and suppression. A blazing golden light that was like a blazing sun soared into the sky. Immediately, an enormous illusory figure was suddenly thrown out from the collapsed suspended platform. Rumble! An intense gust of wind howled as the gigantic black figure, which was several hundred meters tall, suddenly fell and heavily smashed into the bottom of the floating platform. Everyone's gazes converged as their pupils slightly shrunk. They discovered that the enormous black figure was actually the nine-headed snake that had been so mighty and insufferably arrogant a moment ago. Ooh. The nine-headed snake struggled to get up and crawled on the ground. Ominous glints were revealed in the eyes of his 9 heads. A rare trace of fear was actually revealed as he looked at the golden light that was like a blazing sun on the floating platform. Swoosh! A figure walked over and instantly arrived beside the 9-headed snake. It was actually Huangfu Wudao. However, at this moment, Huangfu Wudao's expression was extremely gloomy and ugly. There was also a trace of shock in his eyes. When the floating platform suddenly collapsed earlier, an extremely blazing golden light had abruptly shot out. The dazzling golden light caused Huangfu Wudao to narrow his eyes. He was practically unable to open his eyes. At this moment, a golden arm suddenly stretched out from the floating platform and grabbed the 9-headed snake's tail. The strength of the golden arm was simply terrifying to the extreme. Even the 9-headed snake was completely flung away by the strength of the golden arm. The instant the 9-headed snake was flung away, Huangfu Wudao had already sensed that something was wrong. Therefore, he had already left the 9-headed snake's body. Who exactly is the owner of the golden arm? Could it be Zhuowen? Huangfu Wudao's brows were tightly knitted together as he looked at the floating platform that was enveloped by the golden light. However, he was still somewhat in disbelief. That power was extremely powerful and he did not believe that it was something that Zhuowen could unleash. However, other than Zhuowen, who else could exist within the floating platform? The other people in the square naturally saw the miserable 9-headed snake as an uproar resounded. They were truly unable to imagine that the insufferably arrogant 9-headed snake had actually been flung away by someone. Was it Zhuowen who did it? This was also the thought in the hearts of many people. Therefore, their gazes were gathered on the floating platform that was still enveloped by the golden light. On the high platform, the Lotus Supreme the Arch, who had been calm and composed, frowned. The 9-headed snake's sudden fall to the ground was out of the Lotus Supreme Thearcha's expectations. The brilliant smile on Grand Haohai's face suddenly froze. His gaze focused on the 9-headed snake, who was in a sorry state. He frowned and his eyes flickered. Rumble! Suddenly, the golden light in the sky reached a peak, and then a violent explosion occurred. The floating platform was instantly blasted into countless pieces, and a golden figure descended from the sky. Boom! This golden figure fell, smashing into the ground less than 100 feet away from the Hydra. As the dust settled, everyone's eyes focused on it. To their astonishment, they discovered that this golden figure was Zhu. At this moment, Zhuowen no longer had 3 heads and 6 arms. Instead, he had an additional head and a pair of arms. He actually had the strange appearance of 4 heads and 8 arms. His body was also 30 feet tall, like a small mountain. What kind of secret technique did Zhuowen practice? He had 3 heads and 6 arms earlier, but now he has 4 heads and 8 arms. How strange! Everyone discussed spiritedly as they looked at the 3 times taller Zhuowen, who now had 4 heads and 8 arms. Their gazes revealed a strange and curious expression. Although Zhuowen's appearance was extremely strange, his aura was much stronger than before, causing many people to cast sidelong glances at him. Your Highness, didn't you say that you wanted me to enjoy my last moments? These last moments are quite long, and it's still not time yet. Slowly stretching his 8 arms, Zhuowen stared provocatively at Huangfu Wudao in front of him as a faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. What a strange brat. No matter what kind of secret technique you practice, do you really think you're a match for me? Huangfu Wudao snorted coldly as the coldness in his eyes grew even more intense. Zhuowen had exceeded his expectations time and time again. Zhuowen's life was much harder than a cockroach's. However, the more Zhuowen acted like this, the more intense Huangfu Wudao's killing intent towards Zhuowen became. 9 heads. Go and kill him. Huangfu Wudao commanded the 9-headed snake beside him. Immediately, the 9-headed snake roared at the sky and turned into a huge shadow that shot toward Zhuowen. At the same time, Huangfu Wudao's subordinates were not slow. Countless air blades appeared around his body as he stomped his foot and followed behind the 9-headed snake, looking for an opportunity to attack Zhuowen. Good timing! Zhuan shouted. Instead of retreating, he turned into a golden light and rushed straight towards the nine-headed snake. Now that Zhuan's nirvana of the great sun had reached the 4th level, his strength was almost 10 times that of the 3rd level. Now, his body was filled with endless surging power. Therefore, Zhuan wanted to see if his current strength was more terrifying or if the Hydra's strength was more terrifying. Boom! The two collided in an instant. To Zhuan, the nine-headed snake's huge body was like a vast mountain that Zhuan could only look up to. However, at the moment when the two collided, not only was Zhuan not sent flying, but he easily blocked the nine-headed snake's forward momentum and completely stopped its momentum. Zhuan roared as his 8 arms erupted with golden light at the same time. A terrifying force was transmitted from his 8 arms. Then, the people around the square were shocked to find that not only was the nine-headed snake unable to move forward, but it was also retreating under Zhuowen's power. Rise! With a low shout, Zhuowen's 8 arms exerted force together, and he was thrown into the air. The nine-headed snake roared, and there was a trace of fear in his voice. Then he was thrown out in front of everyone's eyes. Boom! The nine-headed snake's huge body directly smashed into the open space dozens of meters away, creating a huge pit. The moment Zhuowen threw the nine-headed snake, when Zhuowen's strength was exhausted, the sound of something breaking through the air swept over and hissed in his ears. Without thinking, Zhuowen's right hand suddenly slapped behind him. Suddenly, he felt a burst of pressure in his chest. Feeling the powerful force coming from his right hand, his eyes narrowed slightly. Thump, thump, thump. With a muffled groan, Zhuowen's pupils shrank slightly as he retreated more than a dozen steps. Only then did he turn around and stare coldly at Huangfu Wudao, who was also retreating behind him. At this moment, Huangfu Wudao had just stabilized his body, and his face was a little ugly. The power that Zhuowen had exerted somewhat exceeded his expectations. Even though Zhuowen had hastily counterattacked, he was still forced to retreat repeatedly. Huangfu Wudao, didn't you say that you could easily defeat me? Why have you released your armor soul now? I, Hun, am still standing in front of you. Turning around, Hun stared at Huangfu Wudao, and the sarcastic smile on the corner of his mouth became even more intense. Humph! What an arrogant brat. Don't think that you're so great just because you relied on some secret method to temporarily increase your strength. So what if your strength has increased? I, Huangfu Wudao, can still defeat you. Hearing Huangfu Wudao's ruthless words, Zhuan dug his ears and said indifferently, Are you done? You've said this no less than 3 times, and every time you say that you can defeat me. Let me ask you, we've already fought for so many rounds, why haven't you defeated me yet? As soon as these words came out, Huangfu Wudao's face suddenly froze. For a moment, he didn't know how to answer. That means that what you said just now is a pile of nonsense. Anyone can say such nonsense, and those who say such nonsense are usually trash. In my opinion, you're no different from those trash. As he spoke, Zhuowen took a step forward and instantly arrived in the air above Huangfu Wudao. His 8 arms hung down at the same time, and his terrifying physical strength almost directly shattered the space in the surrounding dozens of feet. What terrifying strength! Just the physical strength alone can shatter the surrounding space. What level has this brat's physical strength reached? Huangfu Wudao's face revealed a trace of surprise as he looked at the surrounding space that had collapsed and the fierce wind that whistled over. Zhuowen's strength had somewhat exceeded his expectations. 10,000 whirlpools protection. With a wave of his right hand, the countless air blades around Huangfu Wudao shattered and turned into a dense whirlpool, forming a whirlpool barrier that blocked in front of him. Boom! The moment Zhuowen smashed into the whirlpool barrier, he only felt a terrifying repulsive force that prevented his strength from moving forward. Moreover, a rather powerful repulsive force bounced back from the whirlpool barrier. This whirlpool barrier is so strange. Feeling the repulsive force of the whirlpool barrier, Zhuowen's eyes revealed a trace of astonishment, and then he said in a cold and indifferent voice, You still have to break it. Break it. Boom. As he spoke, Zhuowen once again swung his 8 arms and pounded the whirlpool barrier with almost no regard for his life. Terrifying muffled sounds continuously resounded. Although the whirlpool barrier was strange and its defensive power was extremely strong, it could not withstand Zhuo Wen's desperate pounding. Thump, thump. Huang Fu Wudao retreated again and again. Under Zhuo Wen's shameless attacks, he retreated step by step without the slightest ability to retaliate. Seeing that Zhuo Wen had completely suppressed Huang Fu Wudao, many of the surrounding people revealed looks of disbelief. The overbearing and ruthless first prince, Huang Fu Wudao, was actually in such a sorry state. This was the first time that they had seen it. And the one who had made Huang Fu Wudao so miserable was none other than Zhuo Wen. It should be known that Zhuo Wen was merely a half-step into the Xuanzuan realm, while Huang Fu Wudao was already at the initial stage of the Xuanzuan realm and had even released the Armor Soul Hydra, but now he was suppressed by Zhuo Wen. Damn little bastard, I'll make sure you die a horrible death. Get out of my way. After retreating dozens of steps, Huang Fu Wudao roared angrily. The feeling of being suppressed made him feel extremely sullen. Suddenly, the whirlpool barrier in front of Huang Fu Wudao increased in power many times, and it actually wanted to push Zhuo Wen out. You want to push me out? No way. Zhuo Wen smiled coldly. His 8 arms pulled out 8 long spears from the spirit ring, and with a wave of the 8 long spears, 8 terrifying wills erupted at the same time. Crack. Chapter 778. Qi like a river crack. A clear and melodious sound abruptly resounded and reverberated in the square. Subsequently, the pupils of the surrounding people constricted as they noticed that the protective cyclone around Huang Fu Wudao's body had actually shattered under the bombardment of Zhuo Wen's 8 arms. Sump, sump. A muffled groan resounded as Huang Fu Wudao was directly pushed back a few dozen steps in this collision. The force generated by every single step was basically capable of shattering the ground and causing dense cracks to spread out. Huang Fu Wudao was actually at a complete disadvantage in this collision, and he was pushed back a few dozen steps by Zhuo Wen. The square instantly became rather silent as everyone watched this scene with slight disbelief. Although they'd faintly sensed that Zhuo Wen's strength had skyrocketed when he executed the 4-headed 8-armed form, they'd never imagined that it would actually skyrocket to such a terrifying extent. Huang Fu Wudao, who'd executed the 9-headed snake-armored soul, was actually at a complete disadvantage in this collision. Don't use your superior attitude to look down on me in the future because you don't have the qualifications. 4 heads and 8 eyes, Zhuo Wen looked at Huang Fu Wudao in unison as his voice that was like rolling thunder suddenly resounded and reverberated in the entire square. Swoosh. As he spoke, Zhuo Wen stomped his foot and transformed into a shapeless gust of wind that flashed towards Huang Fu Wudao once more. As the saying goes, strike while the enemy is weak. After all, Zhuo Wen had broken through Huang Fu Wudao's defense, so there was no reason for Zhuo Wen not to follow up with another attack. Huang Fu Wudao's face was gloomy. The strength of Zhuo Wen, who'd transformed into a 4-headed 8-armed form, had exceeded his imagination, and even his protective cyclone had been broken through. You've merely broken through my cyclone protection, yet you think your strength is superior to mine? How laughable! Huang Fu Wudao grunted coldly as he stomped his foot, and an even more terrifying blade of air revolved around his body. He transformed into a gust of wind that flashed towards Zhuo Wen, unwilling to be outdone. Boom, boom, boom. Instantly, the 2 figures collided, causing countless waves of air to surge out from the center of the square along with the continuous sounds of explosions that sounded like firecrackers. They're so fast. I can't even catch sight of them anymore. Looking at the 2 figures colliding and fighting, the people around the square were all shocked. Zhuo Wen and Huang Fu Wudao's speed was too fast. They practically turned into 2 afterimages in the sky that were difficult to capture. The only thing that could be felt from their crazy battle was the terrifying explosions caused by their collisions. Boom! The 2 of them collided once again. Then a ring-shaped airwave formed around the 2 of them. Then, waves of aura poured out like an inverted waterfall. Terrifying auras continued to surge toward the 2, forming a Tenjiang deep pit beneath their feet. The 2 stared at one another in the deep pit, their eyes filled with unwillingness to be outdone. Little bastard! You're quite capable, but you still have to die. Huang Fu Wudao roared angrily as he stomped his foot. An even more terrifying aura swept out, and the blade of air around his body exploded one after another, turning into wisps of sharp qi. The densely packed sharp qi covered an area of several hundred zhang around the two of them. Then, a crisp shattering sound rang out, and the space within several hundred zhang collapsed under the effect of the sharp qi. Qi like a hanging river. As he spoke, Huangfu Wudao once again stomped his foot. Instantly, the surrounding sharp qi surged wildly. In the end, the surrounding space completely collapsed, forming a vacuum area of several hundred zhang. Above the vacuum area, countless sharp qi condensed and turned into a huge and long river. The long river surged forward, containing a terrifying sharpness. It was as if the long river wasn't formed by gentle flowing water, but by the convergence of countless sharp blades. No one doubted that if they were swept into this long river, they would probably be smashed into pieces, not even leaving behind a trace of their remains. What a terrifying long river! This qi like a hanging river is Huangfu Wudao's armor skill that made him famous. He'd utilized this move to surmount a realm of cultivation and kill an expert of the Xuanzuan realm. This qi like a hanging river is an armor skill secretly passed down by the Azure Emperor, and it's an existence that surpasses the monarch rank. I'm afraid it's probably an extremely terrifying exalt rank armor skill. Numerous sounds of discussion resounded. Everyone recognized the terrifying armor skill executed by Huangfu Wudao, and it was an existence that surpassed the monarch rank. Within the vacuum area, Zhuan raised his head and stared at the ceaselessly flowing river in the sky with an extremely serious gaze. He'd never imagined that Huangfu Wudao possessed such a terrifying armor skill. You can die proud since you were able to force me to utilize this qi like a hanging river. Huangfu Wudao stared gloomily at Zhuan, and his expression was slightly unsightly. He was the eldest prince of the imperial family and the first on the Azure Emperor rankings. On the other hand, Zhuan was only a nobody that wasn't well known. In this battle, he, Huangfu Wudao, ought to be able to crush Zhuowen like a hot knife through butter and deal with Zhuowen in a straightforward manner. Yet now, the two of them had fought for so many rounds, and he was even unable to defeat Zhuowen even after releasing the nine-headed snake. Up until this point in the battle, Zhuowen had even forced him to utilize an exalt rank armor technique like the River of Vital Energy, so he was naturally embarrassed. You'll definitely die a graveless death with this move. Huangfu Wudao had a savage expression as he stared at Zhuowen, and he suddenly pressed down with his right hand. The enormous long river that floated in the sky gushed down like a nimble snake. Break apart! As he gazed at the long river that flashed over, Zhuowen didn't dare be careless. After all, it was an exalt rank armor skill, and its might was much more formidable than a monarch rank armor skill. His 8 arms struck out together, erupting with extremely terrifying power. However, to Zhuowen's astonishment, when his power struck the long river actually nimbly dispersed into countless small water droplets, causing his attack, which he had been accumulating power to strike, to hit nothing but air, leaving him with no place to strike. Damn it! What a strange long river. After his attack missed, Zhuowen didn't even have the time to turn around before the long river that possessed an imposing aura gushed out and revolved around Zhuowen, enveloping his entire body. Clang, 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 clang. Countless sharp auras suddenly flashed out from the long river like countless slithering snakes that emitted a cold glow as they flashed toward Zhuan. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed slightly when he sensed the sharp auras in the surroundings. He instantly waved his 8 arms, causing spear images that covered the sky to flash out and obstruct the countless sharp auras in the surroundings. Clang, 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 bang. There were too many sharp auras. Very quickly, they passed through the gaps between the spear images and flashed toward Zhuowen's body, smashing into Zhuowen's golden body. A wound was cut open, and golden blood slowly flowed out from the wound. At this moment, it was extremely dazzling and glaring. This sharp aura is actually so sharp? Looking at the wound that was bleeding golden blood, Zhuowen's pupils constricted and the corners of his mouth opened slightly. The sharpness of the sharp aura was somewhat beyond his expectations. After the nirvana of the Great Sun had reached the 4th level, the strength of Zhuowen's body had increased by more than a few times. Even a heaven-rank lower spiritual treasure wouldn't be able to completely break through his body. But now, this insignificant sharp aura was actually able to easily cut open a wound on his body. It was truly a little terrifying. Jun, don't even think about escaping once you're trapped by the floating river of qi. Moreover, the sharp aura produced by it is extremely terrifying. Even if your body is very strong, it's still very difficult to withstand this sharp aura. Moreover, as time passes, the sharp aura will only increase. At that time, let's see how you'll be able to withstand it. Huangfu Wudao stood in the air and looked down at Zhuan, who was trapped in the long river below. The smile on the corners of his mouth grew even wider. This floating river of qi was his ultimate move. No matter how heaven-defying this one was, it would be very difficult for him to escape from this long river. Within the long river, Zhuowen's gaze narrowed slightly. If what Huangfu Wudao said was true, then the longer he stayed in this long river, the more disadvantageous it would be for him. I have to get out as soon as possible. When he thought up to here, the movements of Zhuowen's hands weren't slow. His 8 arms danced in unison as terrifying spear intent erupted at the same time. For a moment, his battle intent overflowed and his might was peerless. It actually suppressed the sharp aura in the surroundings. However, to Zhuowen's disappointment, the surrounding long river seemed to specialize in restraining yang energy. Although Zhuowen's strength was extremely strong and unyielding, under the encirclement of this current, he was utterly powerless to vent it. Every time Zhuowen concentrated all his strength on the long river would always disperse into countless small droplets of water in advance before swiftly reforming into a long river. This caused Zhuowen to be extremely helpless. Moreover, as time passed, Zhuowen indeed felt that the sharp aura in the surroundings was ceaselessly increasing in quantity. Moreover, it was becoming more and more difficult for him to withstand it. Another few rays of sharp aura passed through the gaps of Zhuowen's spear shadows and landed on Zhuowen's body, turning into numerous wounds on his body. Golden blood flowed down the surface of Zhuowen's body and slowly dripped down. After half an incense stick of time, Zhuowen was gradually unable to withstand the sharp aura in the surroundings. His movements became extremely stiff and the number of wounds on his body was ceaselessly increasing. Blood flowed out and almost converged into a small stream under his feet. If this goes on, I really might be exhausted to death by these sharp auras. Zhuowen was burning with anxiety. Many of the wounds on his body were burning with pain. This long river was really too much of a restraint on his physical strength, causing him to be unable to exert any strength at all. He could only passively endure the long river's attacks. Kid, take 3 steps to the left. Suddenly, Xiao Hei's voice sounded in his mind, causing Zhuowen's face to reveal a pleasantly surprised expression. Xiao Hei, could it be that you have a way to break through this damned long river? Zhuowen hurriedly asked. Don't be so long-winded. Now just do as I say. Every time you stay in here, you will become weaker and weaker. It won't do you any good. Xiao Hei said coldly. Hearing this, Zhuowen nodded. Following Xiao Hei's instructions, he took 3 steps to the left. Take 1 step forward. Take 5 steps to the right. Take 3 steps back. A series of commands came from Xiao Hei's mouth. Zhuowen did as he was told without any objections. Found it. It's here. Chapter 779. Broken River. Zhuowen was standing in a remote corner on the left side of the river. In this inconspicuous corner, Zhuowen immediately discovered a whirlpool that was constantly rotating. Looking at this whirlpool, Zhuowen's eyes narrowed slightly as a trace of doubt appeared on his face. He faintly felt a trace of doubt in his heart. This is the core source of this river. The reason why this river is endless and can't be broken up is because of the existence of this core vortex. That's right. Xiao Hei stared fixedly at the whirlpool as he continued. This whirlpool communicates with the yuan qi of the outside world and continuously absorbs yuan qi to stimulate the activity of this river, causing the river's energy to never run out. Zhuowen nodded his head. Xiao Hei had already made it very clear that this core whirlpool was the key to this river. As long as this core whirlpool was broken, this turbulent river would collapse on its own. The sharp qi is getting denser and denser. You need to break this core whirlpool as soon as possible. Feeling the surging sharp qi around him, Xiao Hei's eyes became extremely solemn. The terror of these sharp qi was beyond their expectations. I will break it now. As he spoke, Yuan took a step forward and his 8 arms brandished 8 long spears. With an indomitable and terrifying aura, he heavily slammed them into the core whirlpool. Rumble! An earth-shattering explosion instantly sounded. The instant Yuan came into contact with the core whirlpool, he felt an extremely terrifying recoil acting on his 8 arms. Dang dang dang! His expression changed as Yuan involuntarily took a few steps back. His eyes were filled with shock as he stared at the core whirlpool before him. What a tough whirlpool! Rubbing his slightly numb arms, Yuan's eyes became extremely solemn. It seems like this so-called core whirlpool is not so easy to break. Continue to smash it as hard as you can. Xiao Hei continued to clamor in Yuan's ears, causing Yuan to roll his eyes. This Xiao Hei really knew how to talk. However, Yuan did not doubt Xiao Hei's judgment. Therefore, after rebounding a few steps, Yuan once again raised the 8 spears and fiercely smashed them towards the core whirlpool. Boom! Boom! As Yuan continued to bombard it, he keenly discovered that the core vortex was gradually slowing down. As the whirlpool slowed down, the amount of sharp qi in the surroundings also gradually decreased. It seems that the sharp aura emanating from the river is closely related to the core whirlpool. Yuan's eyes revealed a trace of understanding. His hands continued to smash the whirlpool with even more force. Since this kind of random bombardment was effective, all the more he could not slack off. At this moment in the square, Huangfu Wudao was still quietly floating in midair as he looked down at the river below. Yuan's figure had long been shrouded by the river and could not be seen through. However, Huangfu Wudao was full of confidence. The qi like a floating river was a venerable rank armor skill, which was extremely rare even in the imperial family. One could imagine how powerful it was. Moreover, the qi like a floating river was an armor skill that countered strength with softness. Yuan's physical body was indeed very strong, but his strength was extremely strong. It happened to be countered by the qi like a floating river, causing him to only be able to unleash about 10% of his strength. Under such circumstances, the consumption of Yuan's strength would be extremely small. When the time came, he would die from exhaustion. Therefore, Huangfu Wudao was certain that Yuan was doomed. Originally, when Yuan used brute force to break through the river, he was still able to create a rather intense commotion. But now, there was not the slightest bit of commotion. Everyone knew that Yuan, who was trapped in the river, was most likely doomed. The qi like a floating river is worthy of being a venerable rank armor skill. It's actually so powerful. I'm afraid that Yuan is in danger. Almost half the time for an incense stick to burn has passed, but there's still no movement from the river. Yuan should have died in there. Sounds of discussion resounded around the square. Everyone shook their heads and sighed. They felt that it was very unlikely that Yuan would survive in the river below. Your Majesty Qing Emperor, you should be able to announce the result now, right? It's impossible for Yuan to break the qi like a floating river. He's dead for sure now. Huangfu Wudao stood proudly. His gaze was focused on the Qing Emperor on the high platform. His voice was filled with confidence and pride. The Qing Emperor nodded and casually glanced at the river in the square. The qi like a floating river was taught to Huangfu Wudao by him. He was very clear about the power of this armor skill. The strength that Yuan displayed when he used the nirvana of the Great Sun with 4 heads and 8 arms surprised the Qing Emperor. However, Yuan's strength was too unyielding. It happened to be restrained by the qi like a floating river, so he couldn't display much of his strength at all. Therefore, the Qing Emperor also felt that Huangfu Wudao was the winner this time. The result isn't out yet? After all, we still don't know what's going on with Yuan in the river. If the first prince keeps the river and looks at the situation inside, we'll be able to confirm the result. Lu Hantian frowned slightly and couldn't help but speak. Although the qi like a floating river was very powerful, he didn't think that Yuan would lose just like that. Lu Hantian. Yuan is a genius of your Muqing County. It's normal for you to have fantasies. However, His Majesty the Qing Emperor has a revered status. How can you contradict him like this? Before the Qing Emperor spoke, Grand Hohai spoke first and put a hat on Lu Hantian's head. The Qing Emperor waved his hand and said indifferently, "It's fine. Since Han Tian doesn't believe this result, Wu Dao, you can keep the river and let him see clearly. This way Han Tian will give up." The Qing Emperor didn't have the slightest intention of blaming Lu Hantian for interrupting. He had great confidence in Zhuan. Moreover, Zhuan's talent and potential weren't bad. It would be a pity if he died like this. That was why the Qing Emperor said so. Hearing those words, Grand Haohai frowned slightly. He was extremely displeased. However, since the Azure Emperor had spoken, he could not say anything. He could only hope that Zhuowen had really died in the river of Qi. Huangfu Wudao put his hands behind his back and the arrogance in his eyes grew stronger. In his heart, Zhuowen was definitely going to die. Therefore, he didn't reject the Qing Emperor's request. Huangfu Wudao nodded and landed in front of the river. Just as he was about to withdraw the qi like a floating river with his right hand, a cracking sound suddenly resounded, causing Huangfu Wudao's pupils to shrink slightly. The flowing river suddenly split into pieces and turned into countless fragments under Huangfu Wudao's astonished gaze. Then a dazzling golden figure rose up. 8 arms flickered with a blazing golden light and heavily slammed into Huangfu Wudao's chest. Huangfu Wudao didn't expect this to happen. For a moment, he was caught unprepared. He hurriedly raised his hand to block, but Zhuan found a flaw. Puchi! A streak of blood streaked across the sky. Then, everyone in the square was astonished to find that Huangfu Wudao, who was originally standing proudly, was actually sent flying like a dead dog and smashed into the ground not far away. Rumble! A human-shaped hole was formed and dust filled the air. Huangfu Wudao coughed a few times and climbed up with some difficulty. His gaze was filled with disbelief when he looked at Zhuan. His qi like a floating river had actually been broken. Although Zhuan looked to be in a rather sorry state with countless wounds crisscrossing his body, his aura hadn't weakened in the slightest. From the moment Zhuan broke the qi like a floating river to when Huangfu Wudao was directly sent flying, only a blink of an eye had passed. Everyone saw Huangfu Wudao smashed into the ground like a dead dog and was in an exceptionally sorry state. Grand Haohai's pupils constricted as he stared blankly at this scene. Zhuowen actually didn't die, and he'd appeared before everyone full of vigor instead. Even more shocking was that Huangfu Wudao had actually been reduced to such a sorry state by him. If one had to say who was the most shocked, it would be Grand Lily. At this moment, Grand Lily's beautiful eyes stared fixedly at Zhuan as a wisp of a bitter smile appeared on the corners of her mouth. Now, she finally saw clearly Zhuowen's true strength. The combat strength that Zhuowen revealed now was much stronger than when he fought her. After all, even Huangfu Wudao was suppressed. So it turns out that Zhuowen had never unleashed his true strength when he was fighting me. When she thought up to here, the bitterness on the corners of Grand Lily's mouth grew even stronger. In the beginning, she'd never taken Zhuowen seriously. It was even to the extent that in her heart, she felt that Zhuan was utterly unworthy of her. This ordinary kid had exceeded her expectations time and time again. She still remembered that in the peach blossom origin diagram, Zhuan had been chased down by her until he was forced to jump off a cliff. At that time, although she'd felt that Zhuan was a bit difficult to deal with, she still hadn't taken him seriously. This was because with her strength, killing Zhuan would have been a piece of cake. However, in the ranking battles that followed, Zhuan had consecutively killed Chao Yan and Feng Yong, 2 of the top 10 geniuses of the previous Azure Emperor rankings. He had even defeated Huangfu Wudao in the top 5 battles. At that time, Zhuan had already attracted her attention, but she hadn't cared too much about him. This was because her strength was much stronger than Zhuowen and the others. Therefore, she hadn't considered Zhuowen a formidable opponent. It wasn't until in the throne room that Zhuowen's cultivation had soared under the Azure Dragon Qi that his cultivation had soared to almost the same level as hers. At that time, she had finally begun to realize that the gap between her and Zhuowen was constantly shrinking. The failure of last night's assassination attempt had finally caused Grand Lily to feel fear. Unknowingly, Yuan had already possessed the strength to kill an early-stage Xuanzuan realm cultivator. From that time onwards, Grand Lily had begun to fear Yuan. Fortunately, she had broken through to the mystic comprehending realm, and her cultivation had also entered the half-step Xuanzuan realm. Originally, she'd thought that with her clan's treasure, the near-distance mirror, she had a great chance of winning against Yuan. However, she had been wrong and had suffered a crushing defeat in the end. Now, not only had Yuan defeated her, Grand Lily, but he had also faced off against Huangfu Wudao. Huangfu Wudao, whom she had always looked up to, had been reduced to such a sorry state. How could Grand Lily not know how terrifying and powerful the current Yuan was? Chapter 780. Favoritism on the high platform. The Azure Emperor's eyes narrowed slightly. The result of Huangfu Wudao being forced back by Yuan was also beyond his expectations. Stomp, stomp, stomp. Yuan slowly walked over and stared coldly at Huangfu Wudao. He said indifferently, "Do you really think you're the winner this time?" Huangfu Wudao slowly got up, a trace of blood flowing from the corner of his mouth. His gaze was extremely gloomy as he stared coldly at Yuan. "Do you think it's honorable to launch a sneak attack the moment I withdrew my Qi River? How can a despicable and shameless fellow like you be worthy of being the winner?" As soon as these words were spoken, many people in the surroundings revealed bewildered expressions. Huangfu Wudao was right. At that time, it was precisely the instant Huangfu Wudao had put away the river that Zhuowen had broken through, causing Huangfu Wudao to be caught off guard. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and said indifferently, "You mean to say that you originally planned to let me out, but I took the opportunity to launch a sneak attack on you, so I succeeded? You still have the face to say this? If I hadn't taken the initiative to let you out, do you think you could have broken the Qi River with your strength? I let you out, but you launched a sneak attack on me instead. I only want to say that this is the first time I've seen such a shameless person like you." Huangfu Wudao stood up, and he still had a proud expression on his face. Earlier, he'd been beaten back by Zhuowen in a sorry state because he'd let Zhuowen out, yet Zhuowen had repaid his kindness with enmity and beaten him back. So that's how it is. This Zhuowen is so despicable. He took advantage of the moment when His Majesty released his Qi River to launch a sneak attack. Too despicable and shameless. Yes. Although this Zhuowen is very strong, it's not very possible for him to break the Qi River. It must be the first prince who released it, but Zhuowen launched a sneak attack at this moment. It's really shameful. This Zhuowen's character is really not good. This child doesn't even have the qualifications to become a heavenly marquis. He actually plotted against the first prince. He is too shameless. Discussions suddenly resounded around the square. Everyone's gazes were filled with disdain as they looked at Yuan. Clearly, they held Zhuowen's sneak attack in contempt. As he listened to the discussions in the surroundings, Zhuowen's gaze focused slightly as he stared coldly at Huangfu Wudao. Huangfu Wudao's ability to invert right and wrong was really skillful. Zhuowen was the one who had broken the Qi floating river. After all, the core vortex had been found by Xiao He, so breaking it was only a matter of time. When had Huangfu Wudao ever done anything to break free from River of Qi? When Zhuowen broke free of River of Qi, Huangfu Wudao hadn't even put away the river yet. That was why Zhuowen was able to drill through it. Now, in Huangfu Wudao's words, it was he who had kindly put away the winding river, and Zhuowen who had launched a sneak attack. Your Majesty Emperor Qing. This Zhuowen is really too despicable and shameless. His Majesty the First Prince had kindly put away his Qi floating river and wanted to let this child off. However, this child took advantage of this opportunity to launch a sneak attack on the First Prince, causing the First Prince to be injured. This is too hateful. Gran Hohai hurriedly took advantage of this opportunity and began to wantonly smear Zhuowen's name. This kind of person with no character is simply not qualified to become a heavenly marquis. Even an earthly marquis is a scourge to him. Your Majesty, you should directly revoke this child's qualifications to become a marquis. At this moment, Huangfu Wudao's eyes flickered. Although he had inverted right and wrong, he knew very well that he hadn't put away the Qi floating river. It had been broken by Zhuowen. However, he couldn't say that because Zhuowen's attack had landed heavily on his chest. The terrifying power had already caused him to suffer a rather terrible injury. Although he still had the strength to fight, he was much weaker than Zhuowen. Moreover, Zhuowen's strength wasn't inferior to his at all. If the battle continued, he would very likely be defeated by Zhuowen because of his injuries. He was the first prince of the imperial family and the first place of the previous Azure Emperor rankings. He absolutely wouldn't allow himself to be defeated, let alone by this previously unknown Zhuowen. This was because once he was defeated, his prestige as the first prince would be greatly damaged. He absolutely wouldn't allow this to happen. In other words, Huangfu Wudao was actually a little afraid. Zhuowen was becoming more and more courageous as the battle went on. He had already begun to feel apprehensive and even fearful, especially since Zhuowen had broken his qi floating river. Now that he was injured, he didn't have much confidence in facing the current Zhuowen. Zhuowen, personally broke the qi floating river. It wasn't Huangfu Wudao who took the initiative to pull it away. Zhuowen stood quietly as his gaze became even colder. His clear voice slowly rang out in the square. Zhuowen, how dare you? Who do you think you are? How dare you spout nonsense in front of His Majesty the Azure Emperor? His Majesty the First Prince has already said that he took the initiative to withdraw the qi floating river. Do you think you can break the qi floating river with your strength? Gran Hohai suddenly shouted as he stared coldly at Zhuowen, as if Zhuowen had done something disgraceful. His Majesty the Azure Emperor hasn't spoken yet. What are you, a dog slave, talking about? Or do you have more authority than the Azure Emperor? Zhuowen wasn't the least bit surprised by Gran Hohai's targeting. This old man had tried every possible means to kill him. Now that the opportunity was so good, how could he let it go so easily? Nonsense! Who said that I have more authority than His Majesty the Azure Emperor? You little bastard are spouting nonsense and slandering others. How hateful! Gran Hohai's expression changed slightly as he hurriedly spoke to absolve himself. The resentment he had for Zhuowen in his heart grew even stronger. His Majesty the Azure Emperor, Zhuowen is despicable and shameless. It's really inappropriate for such a despicable person to participate in the marquee conferral battle. Directly eliminate him. Huangfu Wudao also spoke at this moment. What? Your first prince is in such a hurry to eliminate me. Could it be that you're afraid of me? You don't dare to fight with me? Zhuowen suddenly turned his head and said meaningfully. Huangfu Wudao's face froze when he heard this. He said coldly, Humph! How ridiculous! Do you think I'm afraid of you? It's just that I can't stand your shameless behavior. What right does a person like you have to stand on the arena and fight with me? Zhuowen sneered. He already knew that Huangfu Wudao was afraid that he would lose if he fought with him. The truth was just as Zhuowen thought. At this moment, Huangfu Wudao's injuries were much more serious than Zhuowen's. If he continued to fight, Huangfu Wudao's injuries would undoubtedly continue to worsen and his strength would decline rapidly. At that time, the chances of him losing would be very high. At the end of the day, Huangfu Wudao was really afraid. You said that I'm despicable and shameless because I attacked you when you were unprepared, causing a more serious injury to your body. So you're afraid. You're afraid that you'll be defeated by me because of your injuries. At that time, your reputation as the first prince will be greatly damaged. Don't you think so? Zhuowen took a step forward and his voice rumbled out like a great bell, resounding throughout the entire square. As soon as these words were spoken, many people in the square stared at Huangfu Wudao in surprise. Indeed, Huangfu Wudao's attitude was a little strange. As the first prince, Huangfu Wudao actually thought that Zhuowen was not qualified to become a marquis because of Zhuowen's sneak attack. In other words, if Zhuowen was eliminated because of this reason, Huangfu Wudao could directly obtain the marquis token. Huangfu Wudao's eyes darkened when he felt the countless strange gazes around him. He was a little flustered, but he still snorted coldly. Nonsense. How could I, the first prince, be afraid of you? In my eyes, you're just a lowly commoner. I, Zhuowen, have seen thick-skinned people, but I've never seen someone as thick-skinned as your highness. Today is the first time I've seen it. Zhuowen took a step forward and continued, Since you're not afraid and you don't take me seriously, let's continue the battle. I believe that a broad-minded person like Your Highness wouldn't mind my sneak attack just now, right? Of course, Your Highness's reputation is widespread and your strength dominates the world. Even if you're injured, it should be more than enough to deal with a nobody like me. As soon as these words were spoken, Huangfu Wudao's pupils constricted slightly as he stared fixedly at Zhuo Wen. How could he not know what Zhuo Wen meant? The latter insisted on fighting him. Zhuo Wen sneered and said mockingly, "Since Your Highness is injured, Alun will not take advantage of you. We'll postpone the battle. 3 days later, in this square, Alun will challenge you to a battle. 3 days later, the winner will receive the marquee token and become the first on the Azure Emperor leaderboard. I believe that Your Highness should be able to accept such a suggestion, right?" At this point, the mocking smile on Zhuo Wen's face became even more pronounced. Even an idiot could tell that Zhuo Wen's words were filled with mockery. Huangfu Wudao's expression turned ugly and he fell into a rare silence. Regardless of whether he agreed to Zhuo Wen's suggestion or not, it would not benefit him. If he agreed, it would prove Zhuo Wen's words. He was indeed afraid of losing to Zhuo Wen because of his injuries. If he didn't agree, he would have to face Zhuo Wen directly. The situation would be extremely disadvantageous for him. For a moment, Huangfu Wudao was caught between a rock and a hard place. Alright, then we'll go with Zhuo Wen's suggestion. Wudao's injuries are rather serious because of your sneak attack, Hyun, so this battle will not be fair. Therefore, we'll postpone the battle to 3 days later. The marquee token will belong to whoever wins. The Cyan Emperor finally spoke. However, his words caused Zhuo Wen to narrow his eyes. It was obvious that the Azure Emperor was siding with Huangfu Wudao. Given the Azure Emperor's cultivation, how could he not see that Huangfu Wudao hadn't taken the initiative to cancel the Qi cascading river, but that he, Zhuo Wen, had broken it? Although the Azure Emperor knew the truth, he didn't expose it. Instead, he only spoke after Zhuo Wen suggested postponing the battle. Wasn't he siding with Huangfu Wudao? The mocking smile on Zhuo Wen's face deepened, but he didn't raise any objections. He stared indifferently at Huangfu Wudao and said, "Let's fight again in 3 days. When the time comes, don't try to find an excuse like today." Chapter 781. The ugly man Zhuo Wen's departure caused many people in the square to discuss. From Emperor Qing's attitude and Zhuo Wen's words, they faintly guessed that the truth was probably not as Huangfu Wudao had said. There were even many people who revealed thoughtful expressions as they gradually realized that the truth from before was probably not simple. However, since Emperor Qing had spoken, no one had any objections. Although the final outcome of the battle between Zhuo Wen and Huangfu Wudao had not been decided, Zhuo Wen's brilliant performance was deeply imprinted in everyone's minds. Originally, everyone thought that Huangfu Wudao would be able to deal with Zhuo Wen in a straightforward manner when he appeared in a domineering and merciless manner. However, the final outcome was far beyond everyone's expectations. Not only was Zhuo Wen not dealt with by Huangfu Wudao, but Huangfu Wudao was put into a rather sorry state by Zhuo Wen instead. Everyone knew that Zhuo Wen's true combat strength was actually not inferior to Huangfu Wudao. So many people were extremely looking forward to the battle between Zhuo Wen and Huangfu Wudao in 3 days. They all knew that the battle in 3 days would absolutely be extremely exciting. In the square, Huangfu Wudao returned to Emperor Qing's side with a gloomy expression and remained silent. He had suffered such a great loss at the hands of Zhuo Wen today, and he was practically gnashing his teeth. At the same time, he was shocked by Zhuo Wen's strength. Wudao, return to the throne room first. Use these 3 days to recuperate properly. Emperor Qing glanced indifferently at Huangfu Wudao. Yes. Huangfu Wudao cupped his hands and followed Emperor Qing into the throne room, and they quickly disappeared from everyone's sight. Following Emperor Qing's departure, the others in the square naturally had no reason to stay and dispersed one after another. Grand Haohai was also preparing to leave the square with Grand Lily, but he noticed that his daughter was actually standing blankly on the spot. "Lily, what are you thinking about?" Grand Haohai suddenly asked. Grand Lily returned to her senses and sighed lightly. "Father, Zhuo Wen's growth is too fast. Even Huangfu Wudao is unable to do anything to him now. Was it wrong for us to suppress him back then? Hearing this, Grand Hao Hai was stunned, then he smiled and said, Baihe, could it be that you regret it? Do you regret breaking off the engagement? Grand Lily was stunned when she heard this. Her beautiful eyes flickered. She was originally a proud daughter of the Grand Clan and was a monstrous genius ranked in the top 10 of the Azure Emperor rankings. Back then, she thought highly of herself and naturally looked down on Zhuan, who came from a small clan. The other half that she, Grand Lily, worshipped was naturally a powerful and peerless genius. Within the Qingxian Empire, only Huangfu Wudao could fulfill this condition. It was just that Huangfu Wudao had been hiding in the imperial family all year round, so Grand Lily didn't have many opportunities to see Huangfu Wudao. However, she actually admired Huangfu Wudao's strength. But now, not only had the disciple of a small clan that she had looked down on previously defeated her, even Huangfu Wudao, whom she worshipped, had been defeated. All of this caused her heart to become chaotic. She did indeed have a trace of regret in her heart. If their Grand Clan hadn't been so ruthless back then, perhaps their relationship with Zhuan wouldn't be so bad now, to the point where it would only end with one side dead. However, Grand Hao Hai patted Grand Lily's shoulder with a wisp of wisdom in his eyes and said, Baihe, it has already happened, so there's no use regretting it. This Zhuan is a great threat, and he has a life and death enmity with our Grand Clan. So what we should do now isn't regret, but think of a way to kill Zhuan. Grand Lily's beautiful eyes flickered when she heard this. She nodded and said, I understand, but it's already very difficult to kill this Zhuan now. Back then, you joined forces with the Chao and Feng clans, but you still couldn't kill him. Now, this Zhuan's strength isn't inferior to the first prince, so it's too difficult to kill him. Grand Lily was clearly aware of how strong Zhuan was now. The cultivators of the Xuanzuan realm were nothing before Zhuan. Perhaps only an expert at the sovereign stage or above would be effective. That's right. If we rely on our Grand Clan now, it's indeed very difficult to kill this Zhuan. After all, this lad has Lu Hantian by his side constantly protecting him. However, have you forgotten that this lad is Zhuo Xiaotian's son? The Blue Dragon Hall should be interested in him. At this point, the smile on Grand Hao Hai's face grew even wider. So what if he's Zhuo Xiaotian's son? After all, father, you've already checked that this lad doesn't have a dragon soul, and without a dragon soul, he naturally won't attract the Blue Dragon Hall's interest. Grand Lily naturally knew that Zhuan was Zhuo Xiaotian's son, and she was also very clear about Zhuo Xiaotian's past deeds. However, Grand Hao Hai had already confirmed that Zhuan only had a useless armor soul and didn't have a dragon soul. Just based on the fact that Zhuan was Zhuo Xiaotian's son, he probably wouldn't attract the Blue Dragon Hall's attention. I'm afraid I've made a mistake back then. After all, this lad's speed of improvement is too strange. It's extremely similar to Zhuo Xiaotian's back then, so I can't help but be suspicious now. At this point, Grand Hao Hai looked around. Seeing that no one was paying attention to them, he continued to whisper to Grand Lily, Come with father first. There's someone who can verify whether this Zhuan has a dragon soul or not. With that, Grand Hao Hai waved his sleeve and brought Grand Lily away from the plaza. In the northeast corner of the imperial city, there was a dilapidated temple. The surroundings of the temple were desolate, overgrown with weeds, and sparsely populated. Two figures flew over and stopped outside the temple. It was Grand Hao Hai and Grand Lily. Grand Lily's beautiful eyes were filled with doubt. She didn't understand why Grand Hao Hai brought her here. Perhaps he noticed the doubt on Grand Lily's face. Grand Hao Hai smiled and explained, Father said that I'll bring you to see someone. This person is the key to proving whether Zhuan has an armor soul or not. With that, Grand Hao Hai brought Grand Lily into the temple. Passing through the messy courtyard, the two of them entered the main entrance of the temple. Inside the main entrance was a narrow space. A stone statue with a blurry face was sitting on a high platform, facing the main entrance. Entering the temple, Grand Lily furrowed her brows. This temple was too messy. Dust was piled up inside, cobwebs were everywhere, and there was even a strange smell in the air. Not to mention Grand Lily, Even a normal man's face wouldn't be any better if he entered this messy temple for the first time. Grand Hao Hai didn't feel anything about this. Instead, he looked around and said loudly, "Come out. I know you're in the temple." After waiting for a while, the temple was still silent. There was no reply. It was so quiet that it was terrifying. Didn't you want to deal with Zhuowen? Didn't you want to kill Lu Hantian? If you don't show yourself, you'll lose this opportunity forever. Grand Hao Hai wasn't in a hurry. Instead, he slowly spoke again. He had a good understanding of the people in the temple. He didn't believe that the person wouldn't come out. Boom! An explosive sound rang out, and the blurry stone statue exploded into countless pieces. From the stone statue, a figure with ragged clothes, a stooped figure, and a blurry face suddenly rushed out. This person's face was extremely ugly. When Grand Lily saw this person's face for the first time, she couldn't help but jump in fright. Fortunately, her will was firm, and she quickly recovered her composure. Moreover, this person's right hand was empty. He was actually a one-armed person. For some reason, he had lost an arm. What did you just say? You can kill Lu Hantian and Zhuowen? As soon as this person came out, he hurriedly came in front of Grand Hao Hai and shouted with an excited expression. His entire body couldn't help but tremble. Looking at the trembling figure in front of him, Grand Hao Hai frowned and said indifferently, "Lu Hantian is an Empyrean realm powerhouse. It's a bit difficult to kill him, but it's much easier to kill Zhuowen." Hearing this, the person slowly calmed down and frowned. "Lu Hantian can't be killed? How can an Empyrean realm powerhouse be so easy to kill?" After all, the nascent soul of an Empyrean realm powerhouse is already very tough. Even if the body collapses, the nascent soul can leave the body and even survive for a long time. If luck is good, it can even rebuild the body. Speaking up to here, Grand Hao Hai coldly snorted. His target was only Zhuowen. As for Lu Hantian, it was simply impossible to kill him. Unless Emperor Qing personally took action, but that was basically impossible. Hearing this, the person's expression relaxed. What Grand Hao Hai said was right. Lu Hantian was in existence at the peak of the Empyrean realm. It was undoubtedly unrealistic to want to kill such a powerhouse. Of course, if they could join forces with dozens of Empyrean realm powerhouses, they might be able to take Lu Hantian's life. But was that possible? In the entire Qingxian Empire, there were probably no more than 2 digits of Empyrean realm powerhouses. Where could they find dozens of Empyrean realm powerhouses? The ugly person also knew that it was unrealistic to want to kill Lu Hantian. He gritted his teeth and said, "It's fine if you can kill Zhuowen. Tell me, what do you want me to do to kill Zhuowen? Didn't you say to me back then that Zhuowen once revealed the dragon soul? If what you said is true, this Zhuowen will undoubtedly die. Of course, if it's false, the one who will die is you." Grand Hao Hai's eyes flickered as he said, "Don't worry, that Zhuowen definitely has the dragon soul. I saw it with my own eyes back then. It's absolutely not false." The ugly person snorted coldly. When these words came out, Grand Hao Hai couldn't help but be moved. She finally understood why Zhuowen's progress was so fast. Moreover, it was unbelievably fast. It turned out that there was a legendary dragon soul in Zhuowen's body. Moreover, judging from Zhuowen's potential and talent, the dragon soul that he possessed was probably of a higher grade than that of Qin Yan. If it's true, that's the best. Follow us to a place first. If what you said is true, you don't need to do anything. Someone will take care of Zhuowen. Grand Hao Hai said indifferently. Where are we going? The ugly person asked with some vigilance. The imperial capital's Azure Dragon Subpalace. Chapter 782. The nature of the immovable wisdom king. The dark night slowly descended. Dark clouds covered the night sky and not a single star could be seen. It looked rather eerie and cold. There was a small hill behind the Drunken Spring Pavilion that was covered in dense forests and sparsely populated. At this moment, a figure was silently sitting cross-legged on a huge rock on the hill. This person was not very old, about 20 years old. He had a delicate face and carried a strange bronze coffin on his back. Zhuan raised his head slightly and quietly stared at the dark night sky with a thoughtful look in his eyes. A wisp of ink-black light emerged from between his eyebrows and revealed the appearance of Xiao He. Boy, you've been sitting here for 12 hours. It's already midnight. What are you thinking about? Xiao He stared at Zhuan in astonishment. I'm just thinking about how I can increase my combat strength in these short 3 days. Zhuan turned around and looked at Xiao He, shaking his head as he spoke. Zhuan knew very well that the Qing Emperor was biased towards Huangfu Wudao in today's battle. It was obvious that the Qing Emperor was determined to give the Heavenly Marquis token to Huangfu Wudao. Moreover, the Qing Emperor would definitely give Huangfu Wudao many trump cards in these 3 days, greatly increasing his chances of victory. This was what Zhuan was worried about. If his strength did not improve in these 3 days, he would undoubtedly be at a disadvantage when facing Huangfu Wudao. After all, Huangfu Wudao was backed by the strongest person in the Qingxian Empire, the Qing Emperor. Thus, the Qing Emperor is biased towards Huangfu Wudao, but this is also reasonable. Huangfu Wudao is the first prince of the imperial family and the representative of the imperial family. If even the representative of the imperial family is defeated by you, the dignity of the imperial family will undoubtedly be greatly affected. If I were the Qing Emperor, I would definitely let Huangfu Wudao win. There is no other reason than that Huangfu Wudao is the first prince of the imperial family. Xiao He slowly landed on Zhuan's shoulder. Her pitch-black eyes darted around as she spoke calmly. Hearing this, Zhuan nodded. Although he was aware of Emperor Qing's actions, such favoritism still made him feel uncomfortable. He knew that if today's battle continued, he, Zhuan, would have a very high chance of winning. However, the Azure the Arch had delayed the battle by 3 days, and he was even labeled as the one who had launched a sneak attack. With Emperor Qing's presence, Huangfu Wudao's injuries would definitely be completely healed in 3 days. Emperor Qing might even help him increase his cultivation. What made Zhuan even more fearful was that if the Qing Emperor gave Huangfu Wudao a powerful spiritual treasure, then Zhuan's chances of winning would really become extremely low. Therefore, what Zhuan was thinking about now was how to increase his cultivation to the greatest extent in these 3 days so that he could deal with the competition 3 days later. Xiao He revealed a thoughtful expression. Zhuan was right. Huangfu Wudao would probably become even stronger under Emperor Qing's guidance in 3 days. Although Zhuan's strength was not weak now, it was actually about the same as Huangfu Wudao. Today's battle was mainly because he took the initiative and injured Huangfu Wudao, so he had the confidence to win. If the two of them fought again, Zhuan would not be so confident. Moreover, Emperor Qing might give Huangfu Wudao some trump cards in these 3 days. Then Zhuan's confidence would be even lower. Therefore, Zhuan had to increase his strength in these 3 days. Boy, it's really difficult to increase your strength in these 3 days. Xiao He shook his head. Hearing Xiao He's words, Zhuan's eyes were filled with disappointment. Even Xiao He said so. It seemed that 3 days was really too short. Is there really no other way? Zhuan frowned slightly and said somewhat unwillingly. Just as Zhuan was deeply worried, the bronze coffin behind him suddenly opened halfway, and a pair of strange blood eyes appeared behind Zhuan. Zhuan, don't you have the Nirvana Mahavarokana technique on you? This Nirvana Mahavarokana technique can be improved again in a short period of time. A hoarse voice slowly came from the bronze coffin. It was the voice of the blood demon. The blood demon sealed in the demon-suppressing green coffin is actually still conscious. Looks like you, little blood demon, are not simple. Xiao He looked at the blood eyes on the green coffin in astonishment and clicked his tongue in wonder. When the blood demon had awakened in the demon-suppressing green coffin, Xiao He was still in a deep sleep, so he did not know about the blood demon. Now, he naturally revealed a puzzled expression. You are... The pair of blood eyes suddenly looked at Xiao He. The indifferent blood eyes revealed a rare trace of shock, as if they had seen something extremely fearful. This Dragon Lord's identity is not something a little blood demon like you can know. Xiao He's gaze was indifferent, as if he did not really want to talk about his background. However, this also made Zhuan even more puzzled. Xiao He actually called the blood demon a little blood demon. It was very obvious that Xiao He did not take the blood demon, a terrifying ancient saint-level life form, to heart. Moreover, from the blood demon's expression, it could be seen that Xiao He's identity was not simple. Although he was extremely curious about Xiao He's identity, Xiao He clearly did not want to talk too much about it. Therefore, Yuan was very smart and did not ask too much. You said that the Nirvana Mahavarokana still has room for improvement, and that it can be improved in a short period of time. Is that true? Zhuowen's eyes narrowed slightly, and there was a trace of astonishment on his face. The Nirvana Mahavarokana was divided into 5 levels, which were Nirvana, Annihilation, Nirvana, Dharma, and Immortality. Now, Yuan had already cultivated it to the 4th level, Dharma, and could transform into an immovable deity, giving birth to 4 heads and 8 arms. If he wanted to improve further, he would probably only be able to reach the 5th level, Immortality. However, that was the final level of the Nirvana Mahavarokana, and it was extremely difficult to reach that level. Zhuowen did not believe that he could make another breakthrough within 3 days. Perhaps sensing the doubt on Zhuowen's face, the blood demon said indifferently, "You don't understand how terrifying the Nirvana Mahavarokana is. Furthermore, you have never unleashed the true power of the Nirvana Mahavarokana." True power? Hearing the blood demon's words, Zhuowen frowned. The blood demon actually said that he had not unleashed the true power of the Nirvana Mahavarokana. Could it be that there were other secrets in the Nirvana Mahavarokana? You obtained the Nirvana Mahavarokana from the Yuan Qi Tower. However, do you know who created the Nirvana Mahavarokana? The blood demon suddenly asked. Who is it? Zhuowen looked interested. The founder of Buddhism in the Xizjiang prefecture, Bodhidharma, was an existence that countless stinky monks in the Xizjiang prefecture had conferred as a god. Bodhidharma's strength was terrifying, and his cultivation had reached the Buddha ancestor realm. Even the current Emperor Qing was nothing in front of Bodhidharma. At this point, Zhuowen's face was filled with shock. The number 1 powerhouse in the Qingxian Empire, the Emperor Qing, was nothing in front of Bodhidharma. Bodhidharma was actually so terrifying. At the same time, Yun recalled that the Nirvana Mahavarokana had been carved on a golden skeleton. This made Zhuowen suspect that the owner of the golden skeleton had to be Bodhidharma. Then tell me, how should I unleash the true power of the Nirvana Mahavarokana? After hearing the blood demon's words, Zhuowen finally believed him. What he was concerned about now was how to unleash the true power of the Nirvana Mahavarokana. The blood demon said unhurriedly, the Nirvana Mahavarokana was created according to the Akalanatha, one of the 5 wisdom kings of Buddhism. You have seen it for yourself. As you continue to cultivate, you will eventually be able to transform into the Akalanatha Dharma body, and your physical body will be very strong. Zhuowen nodded. The Nirvana Mahavarokana's tempering of the physical body was indeed extremely terrifying. This was something that Zhuowen had personally experienced. However, you have overlooked something. That is the essence of the Akalanatha. The blood demon suddenly paused. The essence of the Akalanatha? Zhuowen asked curiously. Zhuowen really didn't know much about the Akalanatha. He only knew that the Akalanatha was a god of Buddhism. The Akalanatha is the Dharma body of all Buddhism. Hence, he is also known as the King of Wisdom Kings. He is the leader of the 5 wisdom kings. He is the wisdom king who subdues all demons in the form of anger. His body changes to those who are stubborn, obsessed, and shrouded by demons. He uses his voice to wake them up and scare them away. At the end of the day, the Akalanatha is the embodiment of anger. Anger is also very easy to understand. It is a kind of emotional flame. It is a kind of anger that comes from the inside out. If you want to unleash the true power of the Nirvana Mahavarokana, then you need to use a powerful flame to completely ignite the anger of the Akalanatha Dharma body. That's my understanding. It all depends on what you think. Alright, that's all I have to say. Everything depends on your own understanding. As he spoke, the blood demon's voice slowly weakened and finally disappeared into the bronze coffin. With a creak, the green coffin closed. Jun slowly stood up, his eyes flashing. The blood demon's words were very clear. If he wanted to unleash the true power of the Nirvana Mahavrokana, then he had to ignite the true anger of the Akalanatha. And the only way to ignite the anger of the Akalanatha was to use a powerful flame to ignite the potential of the Akalanatha Dharma body from the outside. I understand. Muttering to himself, Zhuan stomped his feet and immediately unleashed the fourth level of the Nirvana Mahavrokana. He transformed into a four-headed, eight-armed figure. A dazzling golden light flashed around his body. 7 types of earth fire, come out. Stomping his feet again, 7 types of terrifying earth fire burst out from Zhuowen's body and surrounded his body, burning fiercely. You didn't really listen to the blood demon's words, did you? You actually intend to use the earth fire to torture yourself. Looking at Zhuan, who had summoned 7 types of earth fire, Xiao Hei held its forehead with its right paw. It looked as if it had expected better from Zhuan. Obviously, it did not believe the blood demon's words at all. I think the blood demon's words make sense. His eyes flashing, Zhuan clasped his hands together and let out a low roar. Instantly, the 7 types of earth fire enveloped Zhuowen's body. It burned fiercely and continuously tempered Zhuowen's body. Chapter 783. Snitch Sizzle. Very quickly, Zhuowen's entire body was charred black by the blazing flames. Black scabs formed on the surface of his body, making him look exceptionally hideous. Xiao Hei frowned when she saw Zhuowen's appearance. The power of the 7 types of earth fires was extremely terrifying. Furthermore, Zhuan had not taken any defensive measures and had directly come into contact with the 7 types of earth fires. Although Zhuowen's physical body was extremely strong and he had cultivated the great nirvana art to the 4th level, it was still extremely dangerous for him to directly come into contact with the earth fires. Furthermore, it was 7 types of earth fires. It's not good if this goes on. How can this brat listen to the blood demon's nonsense? He actually used his physical body to directly come into contact with the 7 types of earth fires. Isn't he courting death? Xiao Hei frowned when she saw Zhuowen surrounded by the flames. Her eyes were filled with worry. No. If this goes on, this brat will be finished. We have to stop him. Just as Xiao Hei was about to step forward to stop Zhuowen, a golden glow suddenly shot out from Zhuowen's charred body. The blazing golden glow shot out and was so dazzling that Xiao Hei could not open her eyes. Crack! A crisp sound rang out. The charred body of Zhuowen, who was sitting cross-legged in the middle of the 7 types of earth fires, peeled off layer by layer. Finally, it turned into a golden figure. What shocked Xiao Hei the most was that as the golden glow continued to burn, the golden figure's body continued to grow taller, as if it was rising from the ground. 30 feet, 50 feet, 70 feet, 10 feet. At this moment, Zhuowen's body was as tall as a mountain, vast and terrifying. I finally know the true essence of Great Sun Nirvana, ha! With his 10 feet tall body, Zhuowen stood tall as he laughed heartily towards the sky. The blood demon was right. All along, he had not unleashed the true might of the great Nirvana. Sunday Nirvana was actually a rebirth from the ashes. Only by bathing in the flames would the full might of the Nirvana of the great sun be revealed. Now, Zhuowen's body had grown from 30 feet to 30 feet. Not only had his body grown, but his strength had also grown at an exponential rate. Zhuowen could feel that the power in his body was almost limitless. It was more than 3 times stronger than before. I can still improve. Again, fuse the 7 types of earth fire for me. Zhuowen laughed. He knew that the stronger the flame, the greater the potential of the great sun nirvana. Therefore, he didn't hesitate to use the fire fusion art. Instantly, the 7 types of earth fires gathered together and finally turned into an extremely huge 7-colored fire phoenix. Swoosh! Once the fire phoenix appeared, it let out a loud phoenix cry. Soon after, it spread its wings and flew high. In an instant, it wrapped Zhuowen in the 7-colored flames. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. The sound of something burning rang out again. Zhuowen's 10-zhang tall body actually emitted an even more dazzling golden light under the burning of the 7-colored flames. Then, under this golden light, his body grew taller and taller. 10 feet, 20 feet, 50 feet, 70 feet, 100 feet. When Zhuowen's height reached 100 feet, the golden glow slowly faded away. The 100 feet tall body stood between the heavens and the earth, looking extremely tall and mighty. At the same time, a terrifying pressure spread out from the 100 feet tall body, causing the small hill under Zhuowen's feet to tremble. It was as if it was afraid of the huge body of Zhuowen. On the hill, Xiaohei looked up at Zhuowen, who was now 1,000 feet tall, with 4 heads and 8 arms. A tinge of shock appeared in her eyes. This great nirvana sun is really magical. It actually has such a magical effect. Nirvana rebirth. It can actually increase one's body from 3 feet to 100 feet. This strength is more than 10 times stronger than before. Xiaohei muttered softly. She could feel that the power contained in Zhuowen's body was far stronger than before. If Zhuowen's combat strength was comparable to the top warriors of the Xuanzun realm before, then the current Zhuowen had probably surpassed the warriors of the Xuanzun realm and was comparable to the sovereign realm. The great nirvana sun was indeed very magical. Just by tempering the body, it could actually increase Zhuowen's combat strength by so much. After all, Zhuowen's cultivation was only half a step into the Xuanzun realm. After using the great nirvana sun, his combat strength increased by so much that it was comparable to the sovereign realm. It was indeed extremely abnormal. Zhuowen slowly stretched his arms, revealing a faint smile at the corner of his mouth. The great nirvana sun gave him an endless stream of surprises. The battle prowess of this 300-meter body was extremely terrifying, and it was dozens of times stronger than before. If he encountered Huangfu Wudao again 3 days later, even if the latter had some trump cards given to him by Emperor Qing, Zhuowen basically had nothing to fear. Nodding with satisfaction, Zhuowen's body slowly shrunk from 100 feet to his original size. He was no different from an ordinary person. A black shadow flashed by, and Xiaohei directly stood on Zhuowen's shoulder. She looked at Zhuowen cautiously and said, "It seems that the blood demon really didn't lie. Your great nirvana sun is indeed extraordinary." At this moment, Zhuowen was in an extremely good mood. The breakthrough of the great nirvana sun had increased his strength by more than 10 times. He was not afraid of the battle 3 days later. Let's go back first. This great nirvana sun is really broad and profound. There are still 3 days left. I can study it properly. With a smile at the corner of his mouth, Zhuowen took a step and disappeared into the hills, under the night sky. In the northeast of the imperial capital, there was an extremely majestic hall. The shape of this hall was like a coiling dragon, and it had a magnificent aura. At the front of the hall stood a huge stone tablet. On the surface of the stone tablet, there were 3 large words, Blue Dragon Hall. This was where the Azure Dragon Hall of the imperial capital was located. 3 figures arrived in an instant and slowly landed in the sky above the Blue Dragon Hall. One of the 3 was a tall and sturdy middle-aged man with an imposing appearance. He was the Grand Family's patriarch, Grand Haohai. Standing beside Grand Haohai was the beautiful and graceful Grand Lily. Behind the 2 of them, there was a cautious figure. This person's clothes were ragged, and he had greasy hair and a dirty face. His appearance was extremely ugly, and he looked neither like a human nor a ghost. Anyone who looked at him would lose their appetite. "Follow us in." Grand Haohai turned his head to look at the figure behind him and said unhurriedly. Then, he landed in front of the Blue Dragon Hall's entrance. The figure's eyes flickered. He gritted his teeth and followed behind Grand Haohai. "Who are the 3 of you? Why have you come to my Blue Dragon Hall?" At the entrance of the Blue Dragon Hall, there were 2 warriors in green armor. At this moment, the 2 warriors in green armor were holding green spears and pointing at Grand Haohai and the other 2. Their eyes were full of vigilance and hostility. "Please don't misunderstand. I'm Grand Haohai from the Grand Family. I have an important matter to discuss with Prince Aoki. I hope the 2 of you can make an exception," Grand Haohai said lightly. When the 2 soldiers heard this, they were shocked. They naturally knew Grand Haohai. He was the patriarch of the Grand Family, one of the 5 major families. Although the Grand Family's power was far inferior to the Azure Dragon subsidiary temple, it was well known in the imperial city. Now, the person in front of them was the patriarch of the Grand family. Such a person was not someone that the two little soldiers could afford to offend. Since it's the patriarch of the Grand family, it's fine. It's just that we have to follow the procedure. We have to report first before we can let the three of you in. I wonder if the patriarch of the Grand family has any opinion on this? One of the warriors in green armor answered cautiously. The patriarch of the Grand family was not an existence that he could neglect. Go ahead and report. I can wait outside for a while, Grand Hao-hai nodded and said. The warrior in green armor heaved a sigh of relief. He cupped his hands slightly and entered the Blue Dragon Hall. After a while, the warrior came out again and said to Grand Hao-hai, the palace master allows the three of you to enter the hall. Hearing this, Grand Hao-hai was not surprised. After all, he was the patriarch of the Grand family. Aoki would still give him face. After entering the Blue Dragon Hall, Grand Hao-hai quickly led Grand Lily and the figure into the deepest part of the hall. It was an extremely spacious hall. There were huge stone pillars around it. On top of the stone pillars, there were countless fist-sized luminous pearls, illuminating the dim hall as if it was daytime. At the end of the hall, there was a huge throne. At this moment, Aoki, who was dressed in a green robe, was sitting leisurely on the throne. There was a smile on his face as he looked down at Grand Hao-hai and the other two below. Standing beside the throne was Qing Yen, who was wearing a green dragon mask. At this moment, he was standing aside expressionlessly. He did not even look at Grand Hao-hai and the others. Since Qing Yen was completely defeated by Zhuan in the marquee battle, he had become taciturn and eccentric. I wonder why the patriarch of the Grand family has come to visit so late at night? Aoki leaned against the throne and said lazily. Grand Hao-hai smiled and said, Prince Aoki, the news I brought this time will definitely excite you. Hearing this, Aoki's eyes suddenly showed a trace of interest. Since Grand Hao-hai said this, it meant that the news from the former was definitely not ordinary. Tell me about it. Aoki nodded and said with interest. I wonder if Greenwood Palace Master is interested in the descendant of the Long family? Grand Hao-hai touched the back of his hand and asked unhurriedly. Aoki's eyes narrowed and his face suddenly became serious. Oh, does the Grand family know the whereabouts of the Ryuka descendants? Not only do I know, but I also know that this Ryuka descendant has awakened a dragon soul, and the quality of the dragon soul is not low. At this point, Grand Hao-hai stopped talking and looked quietly at Aoki. A Ryuka descendant who has awakened a dragon soul? Where is it? Chapter 784. The four great Azure Dragon Guards. For many years, the Blue Dragon Hall had been searching for Ryuka descendants. Once they found any Ryuka descendants, they would kill them without mercy. The main reason why the Azure Dragon Hall did this was because 10,000 years ago, the Azure Dragon Hall took advantage of the fact that the Long family's experts were resisting the calamity to launch a sneak attack on the Long family's headquarters, causing the Long family to be completely destroyed. It could be said that the Ryuka and the Blue Dragon Hall had a 10,000-year feud. Once they met, they would not rest until one of them was dead. It was the Blue Dragon Hall's sneak attack that caused the Ryuka to decline. In addition, the Blue Dragon Hall had been hunting down the Ryuka descendants for many years, causing the Ryuka descendants to become increasingly rare. They had almost disappeared from everyone's sight. Aoki was the hall master of the Azure Shin Empire's branch. Although it was located in a remote area and had little contact with the Azure Dragon main hall, he still knew a lot of secrets about the Ryuka. He knew that if he caught the Long family's descendant, it would be a great contribution to their sub-palace. He might even be promoted by the main palace and directly enter the main palace. To the Azure Dragon branch halls that were spread across the eastern lands, being able to enter the main hall was a great honor. Even a branch hall master like Aoki yearned to enter the main hall. Unfortunately, the main hall only accepted those who were talented and had dragon souls of the 3rd grade and above. Even the powerful branch hall masters did not have the qualifications to enter the main hall. Of course, if the branch hall members made a great contribution to the main hall, they would also be given the opportunity to enter the main hall and be rewarded handsomely. The Ryuka descendants had been the target of the Blue Dragon Hall for many years. If he could really capture the Ryuka descendants and offer them to the main hall, then he, Aoki, would have made a great contribution. This was also why Grant Hauhai's calm face revealed a look of ecstasy when he mentioned the location of the Ryuka descendants. Grant Hauhai's ability to read people's expressions was extremely experienced. With a single glance, he saw the pleasant surprise in Qing Mu's eyes, and the corners of his mouth could not help but reveal a brilliant smile. Patriarch Grant, if you can really provide me with clues about the Ryuka descendants, the Blue Dragon Hall will not mistreat you. Aoki Grant Hauhai's Patriarch Grant Hauhai's Grant Hauhai. Actually, Lord Palace Master, you know the Long family's descendant that this old man mentioned. Grant Hauhai Guahai purposely. And Grant Hauhai Guahai. Grant, Patriarch Grant, tell me. He's that little bastard Jun. He's a descendant of the Ryuka, and he has a dragon soul. Grant Hauhai laughed sinisterly. It's him? And he even has a dragon soul? Aoki's pupils shrank, and he frowned. Patriarch Grand, how can you prove that Jun is a Ryuka descendant, and that he has a dragon soul? Prince Aoki, do you still remember the Long Xiaotian from 20 years ago? Grant Hauhai didn't answer Aoki's question directly. Instead, he asked a question of his own. Of course I know about Long Xiaotian. Back then, this guy caused a huge ruckus in the imperial city. If it wasn't for Emperor Qing, I'm afraid that not many people would be able to deal with that demon. Aoki nodded. The smile on Grant Hauhai's face became even brighter, and he continued, to tell you the truth, Long Xiaolan had a real name back then. He was a member of the Zhuo family. What? He's actually a member of the Zhuo family? Could it be that this Zhuoan is related to the Long Xiaotian? Aoki's eyes flashed. Prince Aoki is indeed smart. That Jun is Long Xiaotian's son. Prince Aoki shouldn't be suspicious now. As for whether or not Zhuoan has a dragon soul, the person behind me can testify. At this point, Grant Hauhai stepped aside, revealing the hideous man behind him who was neither human nor ghost. At this moment, the hideous man had a timid look on his face. He had heard a lot about the Blue Dragon Hall, so he was naturally afraid. Looking at the hideous man behind Grant Hauhai, Aoki frowned and asked coldly, "You've seen Jun use a dragon soul with your own eyes?" At the mention of Jun, the hideous man's eyes were filled with resentment, and he said fiercely, "Yes. I've seen Jun use a dragon soul with my own eyes. I can't be wrong. Moreover, this kid's dragon soul is extremely strong." If Prince Aoki still has doubts, you can take the detector of your Blue Dragon Hall to the Drunk Spring Pavilion. At that time, whether or not Jun has a dragon soul, you'll know at a glance. Grant Hauhai said with his hands behind his back. Hearing this, Aoki's eyes slowly narrowed, as if he was thinking. Qin Yen, who was standing beside the throne, stepped forward and said respectfully to Aoki, "Hall Master, what Patriarch Grant said makes sense. We can take the detector to the Drunk Spring Pavilion. Even if Kun doesn't have a dragon soul, we'll treat this as a misunderstanding. If so, then that's the best result. We'd rather kill the wrong person than let him go." Hearing Qin Yan's words, Aoki stood up and said loudly, "Qin Yan, you're right. We'd rather kill the wrong person than let him go. As long as it involves the Ryuka bloodline, this one can't be let go. Qin Yan, go get the Dragon Soul detector and ask the 4 Azure Dragon Guards to come out. We'll immediately go to the Drunk Spring Pavilion." With a wave of his sleeve, Aoki said in a clear voice, "Sir." Hearing this, Qin Yan's eyes were filled with joy. This operation was aimed at Zhuoan, which was what he wanted to see the most. Therefore, Qin Yan's efficiency was extremely high, and he immediately went to arrange for the Azure Dragon Guards and the Dragon Soul detector. They're mobilizing the Azure Dragon Guards? Grant Hauhai was slightly startled, and then the smile on his face became even brighter. He knew quite a bit about the Azure Dragon Guards. Speaking of which, the Azure Dragon Guards were the guards of the Blue Dragon Hall. They were not ordinary guards, but top-level guards. In the entire Azure Dragon Hall, there were only 4 Azure Dragon Guards. These 4 Azure Dragon Guards were all terrifyingly powerful. The weakest among them was at the peak of the Xuanzuan realm, and the strongest had even reached the golden venerable stage, which was comparable to Grant Hauhai. Therefore, when he heard that Aoki was planning to dispatch the Azure Dragon Guards, Grant Hauhai was naturally overjoyed. He knew that Jun was doomed this time. Suddenly, the ugly figure took a step forward and said, "Prince Aoki, can I join you in this operation to encircle and annihilate Juon? I want to personally kill that little bastard Juon." "Sure. Your strength is at the early stage of the sovereign stage. This time, follow the Azure Dragon Guards to the Drunken Spring Pavilion." Aoki looked at the ugly man below and nodded. He did not refuse his request. He could tell that this person's cultivation was at the early stage of the sovereign stage with a single glance. His cultivation was pretty good, and he would be of great help in the process of encircling and annihilating Juon. "Then, thank you, Prince Aoki." The ugly man hurriedly expressed his thanks, but his eyes were filled with a cold glint. This time, he would definitely make sure that Juon died without a burial place. Qin Yan's efficiency was extremely fast. He quickly gathered 4 Azure Dragon Guards and even brought out the Dragon Soul Detector from the depths of the Blue Dragon Hall. The Dragon Soul Detector was oval in shape. It was purely formed by intertwining azure iron wires. In the center of the azure iron wires, there was a small golden ball that was shining brightly. At this moment, it looked rather dim and did not have any luster. If that Juon really has a dragon soul in his body, then this Dragon Soul Detector will emit a dazzling light when it's within 100 meters of that brat. Of course, the higher the quality of the Dragon Soul, the more intense the light will be. Aoki slowly explained to Grant Hauhai and the others. "Since everyone is here, let's set off for the Drunken Spring Pavilion. Lu Hantian is a heavenly venerable expert, so I'll hold him back alone. Qin Yan, you command the Azure Dragon Guards. If you find out that Jun is really a Ryuka descendant, don't kill him. Capture him alive, understand?" Aoki looked at Qin Yan and instructed him seriously. He knew that Qin Yan felt humiliated after being defeated by Juon in the marquee battle, so he had always wanted to kill Juon. If Juon was really a Ryuka descendant, then he was naturally more valuable alive than dead. Furthermore, Juon had a dragon soul in his body, so he could not be killed. This was because the Azure Dragon Main Hall would capture Ryuka descendants with dragon souls alive and would not kill them. Although Aoki did not know why the Main Hall did this, he knew that a living Ryuka descendant was more valuable than a dead Ryuka descendant. Qin Yan's eyes narrowed and he lowered his head in agreement. Although he could not kill Juon, he could completely torture Juon. This way, he could also vent the hatred in his heart. "Let's set off now." After giving his instructions, Aoki waved his hand and led Qin Yan and the Azure Dragon Guards away. The ugly man was not to be outdone and followed closely behind the Azure Dragon Guards. Grant Hauhai did not immediately follow. Instead, he silently watched as Aoki disappeared into the distance. He stood in place and did not have any intention of moving. "Father, are you not going to the Drunken Spring Pavilion?" Grant Lily asked in surprise. She knew that Grant Hauhai had always wanted to kill Juon. Now that the people of the Blue Dragon Hall had set off, Grant Hauhai did not seem to be in a hurry. Don't be anxious. Father has always felt that Juon is not simple. I'm afraid that the Blue Dragon Hall is not enough to take down Juon, so we still need to meet someone." Grant Hauhai suddenly smiled. "Who?" Grant Lily asked subconsciously. If Juon was only a Ryuka descendant, then that person would not be interested. However, Juon is the same as Long Shaun, a Ryuka descendant with dragon souls. Then that person will really be interested in Juon. Grand Hauhai smiled mysteriously and did not reveal the identity of the person he spoke of. Instead, with a wave of his sleeve, he brought Grand Lily and broke through the air. He left the Azure Dragon Palace and shot towards the Imperial City. A figure was as fast as lightning. He quickly stepped on the night sky and returned to the Drunken Spring Pavilion in an instant. This person had a delicate face and carried a green coffin on his back. It was Yun, who had just returned from the nearby hills. After returning to the Drunken Spring Pavilion, Juan greeted Lu Hantian and directly returned to his room. He began to go into seclusion and silently comprehend the nirvana of the Great Sun, hoping to unearth more of its potential. Chapter 785. Distortion? What a powerful aura. An expert has come to the Drunken Spring Pavilion? In a rather luxurious room in the Drunken Spring Pavilion, Lu Hantian, who was sitting cross-legged, suddenly opened his eyes. A cold light burst out from his eyes. In his senses, he discovered that there were several terrifying auras rushing towards the Drunken Spring Pavilion. Their speed was extremely fast and their target was clear. They were obviously coming for the Drunken Spring Pavilion. With a stomp of his foot, Lu Hantian disappeared from the room and instantly appeared 1,000 miles away from the Drunken Spring Pavilion. Quietly floating in the air, Lu Hantian looked into the distance and immediately saw 6 figures flying towards him as fast as lightning. Blue Dragon Hall's Aoki? At the front of the 6 figures was a middle-aged man wearing a green robe. He had a smile on his face as he lightly floated over. He seemed to be taking a leisurely stroll, but in reality, a single step was 100 miles away. It was almost as if he had shrunk the ground into an inch. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Aoki also noticed Lu Hantian in front of him. With a wave of his right hand, he stopped dozens of meters in front of Lu Hantian. Seeing that Aoki had stopped, the 6 figures behind him also stopped and looked at Lu Hantian in front of them. What is the meaning of this? Why did you mobilize the Azure Dragon Guard in the middle of the night and even come to the Drunken Spring Pavilion? Lu Hantian asked with an unkind gaze. Aoki didn't care about Lu Hantian's unkind attitude. The corner of his mouth rose as he said indifferently, "Brother Hun, why are you so angry? We didn't come to the Drunken Spring Pavilion for you." Could it be Zhuowen? Lu Hantian's eyes flashed with a cold light as he probed. That's right. It's Zhuowen. The Azure Dragon generously admitted. Lu Hantian's pupils shrank, and he coldly said, "Yun doesn't seem to have offended your Blue Dragon Hall, right? Could it be that the reason you came here today is because that trash behind you, Qin Yan, was defeated by Zhuowen, so you want to avenge him?" After saying that, Lu Hantian pointed at Qin Yan and called him a piece of trash. Qin Yan's expression darkened, his eyes were filled with hatred. Lu Hantian was a heavenly venerable powerhouse, so Qin Yan didn't have the guts to refute him. However, he placed all the blame on Zhuowen in his heart. If he could capture Zhuowen alive this time, he would definitely humiliate him to vent the hatred in his heart. However, Aoki shook his head and said, "This is just a small matter. It's really impossible for this hall master to mobilize so many people for this. You can only blame it on the fact that Zhuowen has a dragon soul and is a descendant of the Ryuka." After saying that, Lu Hantian's heart clenched. He frowned slightly and looked at Aoki with a grave expression. He didn't expect Aoki to know that Zhuowen had a dragon soul. However, Lu Hantian still couldn't figure out how Aoki knew. After all, Zhuowen had never displayed a dragon soul in front of others. Aoki! Some things can't be guessed carelessly. Zhuowen's surname is Zhua, not Long. He's not a descendant of the Ryuka. Now that you've mobilized so many people to capture Zhuowen and believe that he's a descendant of the Ryuka, you must show evidence. Lu Hantian coldly snorted. When Lu Hantian said this, the ugly one-armed man behind the Azure Dragon Guard suddenly laughed loudly and said, "Lu Hantian, how laughable. Even now, you still want to hide the secret of Zhuowen's dragon soul?" When we were at the Baichuan Marquis mansion, Zhuowen released a terrifying dragon soul before he died. Although you sealed the mouths of most people, you left out one person. He. When the ugly one-armed man said this, Lu Hantian's pupils shrank. He stared at the man and the doubt in his eyes turned into shock. He said in a low voice, "It's you? I didn't expect you to become like this. You're really neither human nor ghost. Lu Hantian, it's all because of you. If it wasn't for you, how could I have ended up like this? Although you sealed the mouths of the others in Muqing County, you can't seal my mouth. Haha, I've seen Zhuowen's dragon soul with my own eyes. That little bastard is dead for sure." Ha! The ugly one-armed man laughed wildly. It was as if he was happier than anyone that Zhuowen was dead. "You're courting death. Back then, I didn't eliminate the root of the problem. It seems like I was negligent. Today, you'll stay here forever." Lu Hantian's killing intense soared. He stepped forward and his speed soared to the extreme. In an instant he rushed towards the ugly one-armed man. A sharp whistling sound came out of the ugly man's mouth. Seeing Lu Hantian rushing towards him, the ugly man quickly retreated several hundred meters away. Do you think you can escape in front of me? Die for me. Lu Hantian's speed soared to the extreme and he instantly closed in on the ugly man. Boom. With a palm strike, Lu Hantian frowned slightly. He felt as if he had fallen into a swamp. Following that, he retreated several dozen steps. After stabilizing his body, he stared at the green figure in front of the ugly man with fear. Aoki, you dare to stop me? This guy isn't from your Blue Dragon Hall. Lu Hantian looked at Aoki with fear. His expression was cold. He was very clear about Aoki's strength. He was also at the peak of the heavenly venerable realm. He was only one step away from reaching the Emperor realm. The Azure Dragon Sub-Hall's influence in the Azure Mystic Empire was only second to the royal clan. It was far more powerful than the 5 great clans. This was not a groundless rumor. Other than having a huge influence, the strength of the Azure Dragon Sub-Hall's palace master was extremely terrifying. Lu Hantian, the news that Juan has a dragon soul was provided by this person. Since you're so anxious to kill him, it seems like you also know that Juan has a dragon soul in his body, right? Also, this person provided such important information for our Blue Dragon Hall. Our Blue Dragon Hall naturally has to protect him. How can we allow you to kill him just because you want to? At this point, Aoki's clothes fluttered. With a stomp of his foot, a terrifying aura burst out from his body. Under this aura, the space within several dozen feet of him shattered as if it was about to collapse. Qing Yan, bring the Azure Dragon Guards to the Drunken Spring Pavilion. First, use the Dragon Soul Detector to test Yuan. If he has a dragon soul in his body, capture him alive. However, if he doesn't have a dragon soul, kill him immediately. Moreover, this also proves that some people provided false information. Kill them as well. At this point, Aoki glanced at the ugly man behind him. The ugly man's face stiffened. How could he not understand the meaning behind Aoki's words? If Juan really didn't have a dragon soul in his body, not only would Juan die, but he would also be buried with him. Understood. Let's head to the Drunken Spring Pavilion now. Qing Yan nodded as a trace of anticipation appeared in his eyes. Right now, the 4 great Azure Dragon Guards of the Blue Dragon Hall were by his side. Juan simply didn't have the slightest ability to resist in front of him. At that time, Juan would be at his mercy. Sush, sush. As he spoke, Qing Yan brought the Azure Dragon Guards and disappeared from the spot. They flew towards the Drunken Spring Pavilion. The ugly man's eyes flickered as he followed behind the Azure Dragon Guards. Let's see where you're going. Lu Hantian roared in anger. He waved his right hand and wanted to attack Qing Yan and the others. Unfortunately, his attack was basically blocked by Aoki. He couldn't harm Qing Yan and the others at all. Lu Hantian, your opponent is me. I think you should take this seriously. Otherwise, your ending won't be too good. Aoki stared indifferently at Lu Hantian. The arc on the corner of his mouth became wider and wider. It was even filled with ridicule. Scram! Lu Hantian roared in anger. He stomped his foot and a huge blood spear condensed. With another stomp, Lu Hantian brought the blood spear and shot forward like an arrow towards Aoki. Good timing. I've been wanting to spar with you for a long time. It's a pity that I haven't had the chance to do so. But now I can have a good spar. Aoki laughed. Countless green lights burst out from his body and transformed into countless green vines in the air. They flew towards Lu Hantian. Bang, bang, bang. A terrifying explosion resounded as the blood spear and the green vines collided. Instantly, the entire sky was dyed red with blood and green. Bang, bang. The explosion stopped. The 2 figures in the air retreated several hundred steps back. Their gazes were solemn as they stared at each other. Moreover, you're indeed a genius that even the Azure Emperor praised. You're much younger than me, but your cultivation is comparable to mine. Even I can't help but admire your talent, Lu Hantian. Aoki laughed as he charged towards Lu Hantian again. Countless green lights shot out. His power was much more terrifying than before. Lu Hantian's gaze was extremely gloomy. He didn't want to be entangled with Aoki. At this moment, he was worried about Zhuowen's safety. Unfortunately, Aoki's strength wasn't any weaker than his. It was basically impossible for him to escape. Therefore, Lu Hantian's heart was burning with anxiety. While Lu Hantian and Aoki were fighting, Qing Yan had already brought the 4 Azure Dragon Guards to the Drunken Spring Pavilion. He silently looked down at the Drunken Spring Pavilion. Who are those 6 people? As Qing Yan and the others descended, everyone in the Drunken Spring Pavilion raised their heads and looked at Qing Yan and the others with puzzlement in their eyes. That's Qing Yan, one of the 2 peerless heroes of the Blue Dragon Hall. I saw him during the marquee battle. Many people in the Drunken Spring Pavilion recognized Qing Yan, who was standing at the front. They all started to discuss spiritedly. It's actually Qing Yan from the Blue Dragon Hall. I wonder why he came to the Drunken Spring Pavilion tonight? I'm afraid it's because of Zhuowen. After all, during the marquee battle, Yuan defeated Qing Yan and made him lose face. He should be here tonight to get back his face. There were also many people who guessed Qing Yan's purpose in coming to the Drunken Spring Pavilion. Most of them guessed that Qing Yan was here to get back at them tonight. Yuan, hurry up and get out here. Standing on top of the Drunken Spring Pavilion, Qing Yan's eyes were cold as he shouted. Under the amplification of origin energy, his voice was like rolling thunder as it spread out. Oh, so it's the distinguished guests of the Blue Dragon Hall. Sun Yang has neglected you. There are still many seats in the wind and flower area. Why don't you all come down and have a seat, drink some wine, and watch the ladies dance? Sun Yang smiled charmingly. We didn't come here to enjoy the scenery, but to find that little bastard Jun. Get him out here right now. Chapter 786. Betrayal. Qing Yan spoke without any trace of politeness, causing Lady Su's face to stiffen. Her eyes flickered and she remained silent. Yuan, do you still want to be a coward? If you still don't come out today, I will tear down the Drunken Spring Pavilion and dig 3 feet into the ground to get you out. Qing Yan's gaze became even colder. He had already shouted outside the Drunken Spring Pavilion, but Zhuan still didn't come out. He felt even more disdain in his heart, thinking that Zhuan was afraid of the Blue Dragon Hall. Why are you looking for Zhuowen? Suddenly, a clear and melodious voice sounded from within the pavilion. LV Nantian led LV Tao and more than a dozen juniors over here. Lu Nantian raised his head and looked at Qing Yan. He frowned slightly. Zhuan didn't seem to have provoked the Blue Dragon Hall. Why did Qing Yan bring people to the Drunken Spring Pavilion to cause trouble? Lu Nantian quickly asked Zhuan to come out. Otherwise, all of you from Muqin County will be buried with him. Qing Yan said indifferently. What a big tone. You dare to speak so arrogantly in the Drunken Spring Pavilion. Qing Yan, aren't you too arrogant? LV Tao, who was standing beside Lu Nantian, snorted coldly. Qing Yan's gaze turned cold. He glanced at LV Tao indifferently and said, I admire your courage. An ant-like existence like you dares to speak to me like this? You were defeated by Zhuowen in the marquee battle. Do you really think you have the qualifications to speak like this? LV Tao retorted sarcastically. You're courting death. Qing Yan's complexion turned ugly. He shouted in a low voice. His figure turned into a shadow and instantly rushed towards LV Tao. Being defeated by Zhuan was a pain in his heart. How could he not be angry when LV Tao poked his sore spot? Seeing Qing Yan attack without saying a word, Lu Nantian's expression changed slightly. Just as Qing Yan closed in on Lu Nantian shouted and struck out with his right palm, meeting Qing Yan's attack head-on. Rumble! A terrifying force burst out from the two of them, forming an air current that resembled an upside-down waterfall. Thud thud thud. The two of them separated as soon as they came into contact. Both of them retreated dozens of steps before they were barely able to stop themselves and stared at each other. Lu Nan, you dare to stop me? Qing Yan stared coldly at Lu Nantian. Lu Nantian sneered, "How laughable. You've already attacked the geniuses of Muqing County. As the county lord of Muqing County, can I attack? Since you've already attacked, you'll have to pay the price. Qing Si, kill Lu Nantian." Qing Yen said to the Azure Dragon Guard behind him expressionlessly. The 4 Azure Dragon Guards had their own code names, Qing Yi to Qing Si. Qing Yi was the strongest, while Qing Si was the weakest. Although Qing Si was the weakest, he was still at the peak of the Xuanzuan realm. He was much stronger than the average Xuanzuan realm expert. At the very least, he was much stronger than Lu Nantian. As he spoke, Qing Si turned into a green shadow and instantly pounced on Lu Nantian. A terrifying green force burst out, causing Lu Nantian's expression to change slightly. Bang bang bang. In an instant, the two of them clashed. Terrifying shockwaves spread out, causing the space around them to collapse. "Let's see who can protect you this time." Qing Yan's sinister gaze locked onto Lu Yitao. He pounced again and struck out with his right palm. Green force flew out and turned into a dragon-shaped claw, slamming violently toward Lu Yitao. "Block it!" LV Yitao shouted. He formed a seal with both hands, and countless origin energy gathered, forming a huge oval-shaped dome in front of him, blocking in front of him. Unfortunately, Lu Yitao's defense was nothing in front of Qing Yen. It shattered into countless pieces as soon as the two of them collided. Lu Yitao spat out a mouthful of blood and retreated. 2 beautiful figures appeared and placed their hands on Lu Yitao's back. Only then did Lu Yitao stop retreating completely. "Brother Lu, are you okay?" The 2 beautiful figures were naturally Luo Xing and Qing Lian. At the same time, more than 10 other geniuses from Muqing County gathered around Lu Yitao and stared at Qing Yen angrily. This Qing Yen was so overbearing. He directly attacked without any hesitation. Moreover, he did not show any mercy at all. It was obvious that he intended to kill LV Yitao. "What? Are you bunch of trash very angry? But what's the use of being angry? You're no match for me at all. Weaklings should have the awareness of weaklings." Qing Yen looked down at Lu Yitao and the others and said disdainfully, "You're just a weakling in front of Zhuan. What kind of ability is it to deal with us? If Zhuan was here, would you still dare to be so arrogant?" Behind Lu Yitao, a genius said with righteous indignation. However, the moment this genius finished speaking, his head was separated from his body and a strand of blood suddenly shot out. Qing Yen slowly retracted his hand and said coldly, "On the contrary, I hope that Zhuan appears in front of me now. Because the moment that little bastard appears, it'll be the time of his death." Qing Yen attacked too quickly. Lu Yitao and the others did not see it clearly at all. That genius head was separated from his body and he fell to the ground dead. "Qing Yen, you dare to kill a genius from Muqing County?" Lu Yitao's eyes were bloodshot when he saw that genius silently die. "Don't worry. In a moment, your fate will be the same as that guy's. It's just a matter of time." Qing Yen grinned and shook his sleeves. A terrifying azure chi surged out of his body and soared into the sky. It turned into a gigantic azure dragon in the sky. He was using the Blue Dragon Hall's secret technique, the Azure Dragon secret technique. "Why don't you go with that guy? If anyone has anything to do with Zhuan, I won't leave a single one alive. I'll kill them all." Qing Yan's eyes were filled with a cruel smile. At the moment when Qing Yan was about to attack, a silhouette behind Lu Yitao suddenly stood up and said, "Your Excellency Qing Yan, please wait. I know where Zhuan is in Shuiyu. I can take you to his room and you can capture him in one fell swoop." That person was wearing blood-red clothes and had a blood-red sword on his back. He was the first genius of the Imperial Sword sect in Muqing County, Zhu Qi in the past. Zhu Qi had suffered a lot at the hands of Zhuan. However, as Zhuowen's strength became more and more terrifying, the gap between Zhu Qi and Zhuowen became wider and wider. Therefore, Zhu Qi had gradually lost interest in Zhu Qi. However, today, Qing Yen came to find trouble with Zhuowen in a threatening manner. Zhu Qi's thoughts of taking revenge on Zhuowen were once again active. At this moment, he naturally hurriedly stepped forward. Lu Yitao, Luo Xing, Qing Lian and the others were furious. After Zhuan had come back from the mountain, he had informed Lu Hantian that he was going to meditate in seclusion for a day or two. The geniuses of Muqin County naturally knew that Zhuan was going to meditate in seclusion. Because Zhuan was meditating in seclusion, when Qing Yan had come to Drunken Spring Pavilion, Zhuan hadn't come out. You know where Zhuan is? I called that little bastard Zhuan's name outside and he didn't come out. I'm afraid that he ran away because he was afraid. What's the point of knowing where he is? Qing Yan narrowed his eyes and stared at Zhu Qi. Zhu Qi's hair stood on end and he was covered in cold sweat. He hastily explained, Your Excellency Qing Yan, the reason why Zhuan hasn't come out is that he's meditating in seclusion. Qing Yan's eyes flashed with joy when he heard that. He laughed and said, So he's meditating in seclusion. No wonder he hasn't come out until now. Lead the way for me. I'd like to see what that little bastard Zhuan is meditating in seclusion for. Zhu Qi was overjoyed when he heard that. Just as he was about to lead Qing Yan to the Shuiyu area, LV Tao and a dozen other people blocked his way. As a genius of Muqin County, you actually helped the Blue Dragon Hall to betray Zhuan. Are you still human? LV Tao stared at Zhu Qi coldly and said coldly. Zhu Qi shook his head and said, Although I'm a genius of Muqin County, I still haven't forgotten the humiliation that Zhuan brought to me. I didn't do anything before because I wasn't as strong as him. Now that the Blue Dragon Hall wants to kill Zhuan, how can I let go of this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity? Despicable and shameless guy. Luo Xing and Qing Lian clenched their teeth and said coldly, You can say whatever you want. I only want Zhuan to die. Zhu Qi said coldly. Qing Yan came to Zhu Qi's side and looked at LV Tao indifferently. He said, If you don't want to die, get out of here. As soon as he said that, the other geniuses behind LV Tao looked at him and left. Soon, only LV Tao, Luo Xing and Qing Lian were left standing in front of Qing Yan. The three of you don't want to leave. Do you want to die? Qing Yan looked at LV Tao and the other two and sneered. LV Tao stepped forward and said firmly, Yun is the hope of Muqin County. I won't let you disturb him. If you have the ability, you can wait until Zhuan comes out of seclusion before you challenge him. Qing Yan said impatiently, I don't have time to talk nonsense with you. Since the three of you are so stubborn, don't blame me for being merciless. After he finished speaking, Qing Yan took a step forward and his speed rose to the limit. He arrived in front of LV Tao and the other two in an instant. He pressed his palm down and the green dragon shadow behind him roared and swooped down. Luo Xing, Qing Lian, help me. Looking at the enormous azure dragon, LV Tao's gaze was extremely serious. He shouted loudly behind him, and his hands instantly formed seals. Waves of surging origin energy poured out and transformed into an endlessly revolving origin energy shield in front of him. Luo Xing and Qing Lian knew that the situation was critical. They shouted and extended their hands to LV Tao's back. Surges of vigorous yuan power flowed into LV Tao's body. Suddenly, the shield in front of LV Tao grew several times bigger. It was almost 3 feet in size and looked extremely terrifying. Boom! Chapter 787. The Shattered Dragon Soul Detector, 3 ants who don't know the immensity of heaven and earth, scram. Qing Yan's sleeves shook, and the green dragon shadow swung its waist. The defense formed by LV Tao and the other two was instantly destroyed. Puchi. The 3 of them flew back and fell dozens of meters away. They spat out mouthfuls of blood and looked dispirited. They wanted to get up, but they had no strength at all. At this moment, the battle between LV Nantian and Qing Si was coming to an end. A muffled groan was heard, and a figure flew back and smashed into the ground not far from LV Tao and the other two. Dust filled the air. Everyone looked over and saw that the person who had fallen into the pit was the county lord of Muqin County, LV Nantian. At this moment, LV Nantian's hair was disheveled, and he looked dispirited. Traces of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth, and his eyes were unfocused. The attack just now had quite a big impact on him. The sound of something breaking through the air rang out. Qing Si instantly arrived in front of LV Nantian and grabbed his neck with his right hand. He looked at Qing Yen and asked coldly, "Lord Qing Yen, how should we deal with this person?" When LV Tao and the others nearby saw LV Nantian being carried by Qing Si without any strength to resist, their eyes were filled with monstrous fury. "Qing Yen, my father is the county lord of Muqin County. Do you dare to touch him?" LV Tao said in a low voice. Qing Yen ignored LV Tao and slowly walked to Qing Si. He stretched out his right hand and slapped LV Nantian's cheek. He smiled sinisterly and said, "The county lord of Muqin County is actually such a useless piece of trash. If you know what's good for you, you won't have ended up like this." Boom. LV Nantian's eyes were cold. He suddenly stretched out his right hand, intending to grab Qing Yen in front of him. Qing Yan's pupils shrank. He stepped back and slapped with his right hand. A muffled groan was heard, and Qing Yen involuntarily took a few steps back. His eyes were extremely cold. "LV Nantian, you really don't know what's good for you. Since that's the case, don't blame me for being ruthless. Qing Si, kill him directly," Qing Yen said coldly. Lu Nantian nodded and exerted force with his right hand. The crisp sound of bones breaking resounded throughout the drunken spring pavilion. Following that, Lu Nantian's neck bent and he actually lost all signs of life. With Lu Nantian's death, Qing Si casually tossed Lu Nantian's corpse to the side, ignoring it. Looking at the Lu Nantian who had collapsed on the ground and died with his eyes wide open, LV Tao was startled at first, but soon after he let out a hysterical roar and 2 streams of tears flowed out. Lu Nantian struggled to get up. Unfortunately, his injuries were too severe. After struggling several times, he couldn't even stand properly. Staring at the wide-eyed Lu Nantian not far away, Lu Yitao cried his heart out. Although he couldn't stand up, he struggled to move towards Lu Nantian. Although his speed was very slow, he was extremely firm. Finally, he arrived beside Lu Nantian. LV Yitao hugged Lu Nantian's corpse, who had already lost all signs of life. His hands constantly shook as he muttered in a low voice, "Father, quickly wake up. You still have a lot of things to do. Don't sleep anymore. Quickly get up." Looking at LV Yitao who was crying his heart out, Luo Xing and Qing Lian's faces were filled with sorrow. Their injuries weren't any lighter than LV Yitao's and it was impossible for them to stand up. As for the other geniuses of Muqin County who were hiding far away, they were all silent as their bodies trembled. Although Lu Nantian's death caused them to feel extremely sorrowful, they even felt a little sympathy for the death of a rabbit. However, compared to their sorrowful emotions, they were more afraid. They were afraid of the forces of the Blue Dragon Hall. Even Muqin County's county lord, Lu Nantian, had died. If they went up, they would simply be courting death. At the same time, Lu Hantian's delayed appearance aroused their suspicions. They were afraid that Lu Hantian was also entangled with the people of the Blue Dragon Hall. Otherwise, it was impossible for Lu Hantian to not know that Qing Yen had mobilized such a large force to Drunken Spring Pavilion. Seeing Lu Nantian killed in an instant, Zhu Qi, who was standing behind Qing Yen, trembled all over. The gaze he used to look at Qing Yen was filled with fear. This Qing Yen was indeed ruthless and merciless. After all, Lu Nantian was the county lord of Muqin County. He actually killed Lu Nantian without even frowning. Lord Qing Yen. What about the 3 of them? Qing Si suddenly pointed at LV Tao, Luo Xing, and Qing Lian on the ground and asked coldly. "They're just 3 pieces of trash. No need to pay attention to them. Go directly to the side room and find that little bastard Jun. There's no need to waste time." As he spoke, Qing Yan's gaze landed on Zhu Qi. He said indifferently, "Bring us to find Juan? If I find out that what you said is false, you know the consequences." Hearing this, Zhu Qi's entire body trembled. He hurriedly smiled and said, "Lord Qing Yan, don't worry. I definitely won't deceive you. I'll bring you to Zhuowen's side room right now." As he spoke, Zhu Qi obediently led the way. His expression was extremely nervous. He was afraid that he would make Qing Yen unhappy. At that time, his ending wouldn't be any better than Lu Nantian. As for Qin Yan, he calmly followed behind Zhu Qi. Behind Qin Yan were the 4 great azure dragon guards who were like bodyguards. As for the ugly one-armed man, he carefully followed behind the azure dragon guards. His eyes flashed with a glimmer of expectation. He could finally see that little bastard Juan. Today, he would definitely get rid of him completely. After a while, Zhu Qi brought Qin Yan and the others to the side room where Juan was. After bringing them there, Zhu Qi slowly retreated to the side. His gaze looking in the direction of the side room was filled with schadenfreude. Ci. A strange sound rang out. Qin Yan flicked his finger and the dragon soul detector that he had brought out from the blue dragon hall suddenly appeared in his hand. At this time, the dragon soul detector was emitting an extremely dazzling light. It almost illuminated the outside of the side room as if it was daytime. What a strong reaction. This Juan really has a dragon soul in his body. Moreover, it's an extremely high-grade dragon soul. Looking at the dazzling dragon soul detector in his hand, Qin Yan's gaze revealed a trace of shock. The method of using the dragon soul detector wasn't very difficult. Moreover, it was based on the reaction of the dragon soul detector to detect the quality of the dragon soul in a cultivator's body. The dragon soul detector in Qin Yan's hand was the lowest grade. It could only detect dragon souls below grade 7. Once it exceeded grade 7, the dragon soul detector would have a violent reaction and be damaged. The light of the dragon soul detector became more and more dazzling. The reaction also became more and more intense. It had almost reached the limit of the detector. Not only was Qin Yan shocked, even the 4 great azure dragon guards finally revealed a shocked expression. They were very clear that only a grade 7 dragon soul could cause the dragon soul detector to emit such a dazzling reaction. Could it be that the dragon soul in Zhuowen's body is a grade 7 dragon soul? The 4 great azure dragon guards looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. That was a grade 7 dragon soul. Such a powerful dragon soul was extremely rare even in the Azure Dragon main palace. Once a dragon soul reached grade 7 or above, it was called a high-grade dragon soul. Its power was much stronger than other dragon souls. Qin Yan's expression was gloomy and there was a trace of jealousy in his eyes. He was the number 1 genius of the Azure Dragon sub-palace. He was the only cultivator in the Azure Dragon sub-palace who had a dragon soul. Although he only had a grade 3 dragon soul, it was a dragon soul in his body. He had a unique position in the Azure Dragon sub-palace. Whether it was Aoki or the Azure Dragon guards, they all valued him. This was also the reason why the Azure Dragon guards were willing to listen to Qin Yan. Qin Yan's arrogance mainly came from the dragon soul in his body. Now, Zhuan also had a dragon soul. Moreover, the dragon soul in his body was even more powerful than his, almost reaching the grade 7 dragon soul. This kid must die. Thinking of this, Qin Yan's eyes were full of murderous intent. His arrogance came from the dragon soul. Now that he saw a more outstanding dragon soul than him, Qin Yan naturally couldn't tolerate this. Just as Qin Yan was lost in his thoughts, a soft sound rang out. Then, Qin Yan and the Azure Dragon guards were shocked to see that the dragon soul detector in Qin Yan's hand had completely shattered into countless pieces at this moment. The light that was originally as bright as day was completely extinguished. In the end, it was eerily dark. For a moment, the courtyard outside the room became deathly silent. Qin Yan stared blankly at the shattered dragon soul detector. His gaze became sluggish at this moment. Not only Qin Yan, but the 4 Azure Dragon guards behind him were also completely stunned. Their expressions froze as they stared blankly at the dragon soul detector. They had never thought that the dragon soul detector, which was used to detect the dragon soul, would shatter while it was detecting the dragon soul. And now, this scene clearly appeared in front of their eyes, causing them to involuntarily widen their eyes. The dragon soul detector has actually shattered. Could it be that Zhuowen's dragon soul is so powerful that even the dragon soul detector can't withstand it? Qin Yan's throat moved as he voiced out his shocking guess. He was very clear that the dragon soul detector of the Azure Dragon Branch Palace was only a low-grade detector. It could only detect dragon souls below grade 7. Once the limit was exceeded, the detector would not be able to withstand it and shatter. In other words, the quality of Zhuowen's dragon soul was not only grade 7, but it had surpassed grade 7, reaching grade 8 or even grade 9. How is this possible? Is the dragon soul in Zhuowen's body really that powerful? The 4 Azure Dragon Guards couldn't help but exclaim in shock. Damn Zhuowen! Qin Yan cursed inwardly. He suddenly lifted his leg and pushed open the door of the room, entering the room. There was a praying mat in the middle of the room. A figure was sitting on the praying mat. At this moment, the figure's body was circulating with golden light. His eyes were tightly shut as he silently cultivated. Zhuowen, you're really in seclusion. It seems that even the heavens want you dead. Then you can go to hell. Qin Yan narrowed his eyes as his gaze locked onto Zhuowen. He took a step forward and used the Azure Dragon's secret art that he was best at. The terrifying Azure origin energy turned into a huge Azure Dragon shadow. Chapter 788. A Life for a Life Clang. The shadow of the palm followed the shadow of the dragon and slammed into Zhuowen's chest. What shocked Qin Yan was that he found that what he had hit was not a mortal body, but a hard rock. Zhuowen's body was actually so hard. After spitting out a mouthful of fresh blood, Zhuowen suddenly opened his eyes, and his gaze contained a wisp of rage. Earlier, he was cultivating the grand rebirth art with his eyes closed with the intention of unearthing a deeper level of potential. Just as he was about to reach a critical point, someone actually slapped him fiercely, instantly waking him up. Some of the results of his previous attempts were completely wasted because of Qin Yan's slap. The moment Qin Yan's palm landed on Zhuowen's chest, he already knew that things were bad. He originally thought that this palm strike would be enough to take Zhuowen's life. Who would have thought that Zhuowen's physical body would be so terrifying? His full-powered palm strike had actually only lightly injured Zhuowen, not to mention killing Zhuowen. Thus, when he realized this, Qin Yan stomped his foot and hurriedly retreated backwards. He could sense that Zhuowen's aura was even more terrifying than it had been during the marquee battle. His fleshly body was even tougher than before. How did Zhuowen improve so quickly? It's only been a few days. Qin Yan thought to himself as he retreated even faster. You interrupted my seclusion and you want to leave? Qin Yan, do you really think that you can come and go as you please? Zhuowen wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. His eyes were gloomy to the extreme. It was all because of Qin Yan that he attacked him at the critical moment. Zhuowen's previous efforts were all in vain. How could Zhuowen not be angry? Boom! With a flash of golden light, Zhuowen arrived in front of Qin Yan in an instant. Golden light gushed out from his right hand as a terrifying power erupted, setting off countless shockwaves in the air. Qin Yan couldn't help but squint his eyes. Grabbing Qin Yan's arm, Zhuowen's eyes were cold and merciless. Suddenly, he exerted force, and the crisp sound of bones breaking could be heard. Qin Yan's right arm hung limply by his side. It was actually broken by Zhuowen. Ah! Mournful screams came from Qin Yan's mouth, heart-wrenching and lung-splitting, hysterical, like the sound of a pig being slaughtered, continuous and unending. The instant the miserable cry rang out, the expressions of the 4 Azure Dragon Guards in the courtyard outside the room changed drastically. They naturally recognized the owner of the voice. Wasn't it Qin Yan? Go! Let's go in. Qin Yi was the strongest of the 4 Azure Dragon Guards. He said in a low voice and led the way into the room. In an instant, only the ugly one-armed man and the frowning Zhu Qi were left in the courtyard. The two of them were scheming and no one knew what they were thinking. Zhuowen, you dare to treat me like this? Qin Yan's eyes were filled with terror as he shouted. The corners of Zhuowen's mouth were filled with a sneer. This Qin Yan really had the face to say such words. He, Zhuowen, was sitting in seclusion in his room. Qin Yan suddenly barged in and launched a sneak attack on him, causing his previous efforts to go to waste. Now that he had fallen into Zhuowen's hands, he actually dared to question him in front of Zhuowen. It was really laughable. Qin Yan, you're really as stupid as a pig. As he spoke, Zhuowen showed no mercy. His right hand formed a claw and grabbed Qin Yan's left hand. Then, with a twist, another crisp sound of bones breaking sounded out. Qin Yan's left hand was instantly broken by Jun. Ah! An even more mournful scream rang out from Qin Yan's mouth. The sound was so loud that it almost filled the entire room. "Little bastard! Let go of Lord Qin Yan." A loud shout suddenly came from the door. Then, a terrifying force swept over and headed straight for Zhuowen's face. In Zhuowen's perception, he could clearly feel the terror of this force. Moreover, the trajectory of this force was very precise. It happened to be between him and Qin Yan, so Zhuowen had no choice but to retreat. In desperation, Zhuowen could only give up on Qin Yan. He took a step back and retreated dozens of meters. He stared coldly at the four figures that came from outside the door. He could feel that the aura of these four figures was extremely terrifying. Especially the person in the lead. His aura was extremely powerful and terrifying. The attack just now was launched by this person. That person is not simple. His cultivation should be at the early stage of the Golden Venerable Realm. I'm afraid you're not his match. Xiao Hei's dignified voice suddenly rang out, causing Zhuowen's pupils to shrink. One of these four people was at the Golden Venerable Realm. That was too terrifying. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Four figures instantly came into the room. The four of them were wearing green armor. Naturally, they were the four green dragon guards. The one who attacked just now was the strongest, Qin Yi. He was a powerful warrior at the early stage of the Golden Venerable Realm. "Lord Qin Yan, are you all right?" The four of them came to Qin Yan's side and instantly noticed Qin Yan's limp arms. Their eyes darkened. "You dare to cripple Lord Qin Yan's arms? How dare you?" Qin Yi slowly opened his mouth, his voice extremely cold and indifferent. "Ridiculous! This Qin Yan is a good-for-nothing. How can I be blamed? It was clearly this good-for-nothing who launched a sneak attack on me first. Even if the sneak attack was successful, it could not hurt me. Instead, I crippled his arms. It's a waste to leave such a good-for-nothing in your Blue Dragon Hall." Zhuowen sneered. Ving. Zhuowen's words were vicious. Qin Yan was so angry that he almost fainted. "Sharp-tongued brat. Second brother, third brother, fourth brother, the three of you take care of this brat. I'll treat Lord Qin Yan's arms." Qin Yi coldly glanced at Zhuowen. He instructed the three green dragon guards behind him and began to focus on treating Qin Yan's arms. After all, Qin Yan's arms had just been crippled. Qin Yi was a Golden Venerable Realm elite. If he was treated in time, there was a high chance that his arms could recover. "Big brother, this brat is just a brat who stinks of milk. There's no need for the three of us to work together. I alone am enough to deal with this brat." Qin Si's lips curled up. He stomped his foot and charged directly at Zhuowen. The corners of his mouth were filled with a sinister smile. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes. He formed a seal with both hands. Suddenly, 3 pairs of lightning wings grew out of his back. He turned into a lightning shadow and dodged Qin Si's attack. With a stomp of his foot, Zhuowen did not clash with Qin Si. Instead, he turned into a sharp bolt of lightning and rushed out of the side window. Zhuowen was not in the mood to tangle with the 4 green dragon guards. What he was worried about was that Qin Yan had led the green dragon guards and aggressively barged into the side room. He wondered how Lu Nantian and the others were doing. Moreover, Zhuowen knew that Qin Yan was able to accurately pinpoint where he was in the side room. There was probably someone leading the way. It seemed that there was a traitor among the geniuses of Muqin County. Qin Si coldly shouted. He turned into a ray of green light and charged straight at Zhuowen. Qin Er and Qin San looked at each other. They were not in a hurry to chase after him. Instead, they chuckled and followed behind Qin Si from a distance. Although Zhuowen was indeed very strong, and there were recent rumors about him killing Xuanzun realm cultivators, Zhuowen had only killed cultivators in the early stages of the Xuanzun realm. Qin Si was at the peak of the Xuanzun realm. He was many times stronger than those cultivators in the early stages of the Xuanzun realm. Although Zhuowen was heaven-defying, they were not particularly worried. In an instant, Zhuowen arrived at the open space where Lu Nantian, LV Tao, and the others were. At this moment, The geniuses of Muqing County had already helped the injured Qing Lian and Luo Xing up and placed them on a seat on the side. As for LV Tao, he was like a statue. He was kneeling in front of Lu Nanshan's corpse in silence. Zhuowen's arrival immediately attracted the attention of many people in the open space. It's Yuan. Yuan is here. Zhuowen's arrival immediately caused the geniuses of Muqing County to reveal joyful expressions. It was as if they had seen their last life-saving straw. LV Tao, who was kneeling in front of Lu Nantian, also saw Zhuowen in the sky. His body trembled, and the sorrow in his eyes became even more intense. Zhuowen naturally noticed that LV Tao, Luo Xing, and Qing Lian had suffered serious injuries. His gaze became even colder. However, when Zhuowen's gaze finally landed on Lu Nantian, who was in front of LV Tao, his pupils shrank to the size of needles. In an instant, he arrived beside Lu Nantian. Zhuowen's right hand touched Lu Nanshan's neck. His body trembled because he discovered that Lu Nanshan's pulse had completely stopped. In other words, Lu Nantian was dead. Zhuowen had a very good impression of Lu Nantian. Not only was he Lu Hantian's brother, but Lu Nantian was also humble and fair. Back then, Zhuowen's limelight in the Vitality Tower had even overshadowed Zhuowen's. Lu Nantian was not displeased by this and did not do anything to suppress Yun. Instead, he was extremely happy and tried his best to rope in Zhuowen. His attitude was extremely good. Moreover, because of his relationship with Lu Hantian, Lu Nantian had even helped the Zhuo family a lot. Moreover, he had stood up for Zhuowen many times. Zhuowen still remembered these friendships and had never forgotten them. But today, the dignified and amiable Lu Nantian had died in front of him. For some reason, Zhuowen suddenly felt extremely uncomfortable in his heart. A monstrous rage surged out from Zhuowen's body, causing Zhuowen's eyes to turn a strange golden color. Brother Lu, who killed Marcu? And who injured you? Zhuowen suppressed his emotions and asked in a low voice. Lu Yitao was startled, then shook his head and sighed. You'd better leave quickly. The Blue Dragon Hall's target this time is you. They already know that you have a dragon soul. If you don't leave now, it will be too late. I say, who killed Marquis Lu? And who injured you? One suddenly looked straight at Lu Yitao and asked word by word. Lu Yitao's expression froze. He clenched his fists and said while gnashing his teeth, We were all injured by Qin Yan. My father was killed by the fourth of the 4 Azure Dragon Guards, and the order to kill my father was given by Qin Yan. Everything was because of Qin Yan. The murderers are Qin Yan and the Azure Dragon Guards. They all deserve to die. LV Tao lost control of his emotions and roared out. LV Nantian was his father and the person he admired the most since he was young. Everything he knew was taught by LV Nantian. It could be said that Lu Nantian was both a teacher and a father to him. Their relationship was extremely deep. Qin Yan, Azure Dragon Guard. Chapter 789. Qing Xin, be careful of Zhu Qi. The one who brought Qin Yan and the others to the room was Zhu Qi, LV Tao suddenly said. Hearing this, Zhuowen's gaze turned cold. Qin Yan's arrival at the room he was in had already made him suspect that there was a traitor among the geniuses of Muqing County. Now it seemed that his guess was correct. They all deserved to die. Whether it was Qin Yan, the Azure Dragon Guard, or Zhu Qi, they were all on Zhuowen's must-kill list. The sound of something breaking through the air could be heard. Qing Si had already arrived in the air above the open space and saw Zhuowen below at a glance. Little bastard, why aren't you running anymore? You were running faster than anyone else, so why are you stopping now? Qing Si looked at Zhuowen with a mocking gaze and sneered. Slightly raising his head, Zhuowen stared at Qing Si. His gaze contained monstrous killing intent as he asked hoarsely, Did you kill Lu Nandan? Qing Si was startled. He originally thought that Zhuowen's face would show fear and helplessness, but that expression did not appear on Zhuowen's face. Instead, it was replaced by a chilling killing intent. His gaze landed on Lu Nanshan's corpse and couldn't help but sneer. You're talking about that trash? It was indeed me who killed him. You're the Lord of Muqing County, but I didn't expect you to be so useless and unable to take a beating. Useless? Unable to take a beating? Slightly clenching his fist, Zhuowen's gaze became even colder. A dazzling golden light burst out from his body and soared into the sky, turning into a golden pillar of light that pierced through the sky. Zhuowen instantly transformed into his four-headed and eight-armed state. His body was 3 feet tall, like a small hill, and he looked majestic. Qingxi, who was originally indifferent, narrowed his eyes when he saw Zhuowen's current state. He actually faintly felt that the current Zhuowen gave him a trace of unease. You're only half a step away from the Xuanzuan realm. Even if your combat strength is very strong, it's impossible for you to be an opponent at the pinnacle of the Xuanzuan realm. The gap between you and me is too big. With a cold snort, Qingxi stepped on the void and instantly turned into a cyan light shadow. His speed almost reached the speed of light as he swept behind Zhuowen. Cyan energy gathered in his hands and turned into a huge dragon claw that blasted toward Zhuowen's back. Bang! Just as the cyan dragon claws were about to reach Zhuowen's back, a pair of golden arms suddenly stretched out and fiercely slammed into Qingxi's claws. Rumble! A muffled explosion sounded, followed by a groan from Qingxi as he retreated. Zhuowen, on the other hand, was like a boulder, not moving at all. Instead, he calmly turned around and stared coldly at Qingxi. What a terrifying power! Rubbing his slightly numb arms, Qingxi looked at Zhuowen in horror. The power of this young man in front of him was somewhat terrifying. From the moment they exchanged blows, Qingxi felt that what he hit was not a human's arm, but an indestructible steel rod. What made Qingxi's face even gloomier was that he was at the pinnacle of the Xuanzuan realm, while Zhuowen was only half a step away from the Xuanzuan realm. The gap between the two was extremely obvious, but now, in their first exchange of blows, he was actually at a disadvantage in the hands of Zhuowen. Didn't you want to kill me? Why are you retreating in the exchange of blows with me now? Zhuowen sneered as he stared indifferently at Qingxi. Humph! Little bastard, all you have is brute force. Qingxi snorted coldly and quickly made a seal with both hands. Suddenly, 2 green lights were derived from his back and turned into 2 huge, broad wings. However, the wings on Qingxi's back were extremely different from ordinary wings. It was even quite strange because there were no feathers on the wings. They were just bare. What was even stranger was that the shape of the wings on Qingxi's back was more like a pair of huge, broad, fleshy palms. At the tip of the wings, dense, bony spurs were derived. It looked quite out of place. Zhuowen, you can be proud of yourself for forcing me to use soul armor realization even if you die. With a light step, Qingxi suddenly jumped up. In just the blink of an eye, he was already hundreds of meters high in the air. His speed was many times faster than before. What a fast speed! Qingxi's fleshy wing armor soul has greatly increased his speed. Looking at Qingxi's sudden increase in speed, Zhuowen narrowed his eyes. With a flash of green light, Qingxi appeared behind Zhuowen in the blink of an eye. He stretched out his right hand and condensed a dragon claw again, grabbing at Zhuowen's back. Boom! The dragon claw directly hit Zhuowen's back, causing Zhuowen to lose his balance. His body leaned forward and his waist bent. Qingxi's speed was so fast that even Zhuowen couldn't keep up with him. Although the attack landed directly on Zhuowen's body and was very powerful, Zhuowen's physical body was strong enough that he didn't suffer any serious injuries. However, a trace of blood still leaked out from the corner of his mouth. What a strong body! You took a full blow from me and only suffered a minor injury. Qingxi's eyes revealed a trace of surprise. The strength of Zhuowen's body was somewhat beyond his expectation. Go to hell! Zhuowen shouted. He reached behind him with his right hand, wanting to grab Qingxi. Unfortunately, Qingxi was too fast. He broke free from Zhuowen's grasp in an instant, causing Zhuowen to miss. Ha! Zhuowen, your speed is not enough. Although your body is strong, your speed is too slow and your flexibility is not enough. You can't touch me at all, so you can only become my living target. Qingxi floated in the air with his arms crossed. The corner of his mouth was full of complacency and even unscrupulous laughter. From Qing Si's point of view, the huge advantage in speed had already put him in an invincible position. Zhuo Wen's speed was much slower than his. Standing there, he would only become a target for him, unable to even touch him in the slightest and unable to exert any force. A flash of lightning arrived in an instant. Qing Si immediately found that Zhuan had appeared in front of him without him knowing. The two of them looked at each other. Looking at Zhuan in front of him, Qing Si's smile suddenly froze. His pupils shrank to the size of needles as he looked at Zhuan in disbelief. Zhuo Wen had suddenly appeared in front of him, yet he didn't know about it. Moreover, he hadn't sensed it at all. What did this mean? It meant that Zhuo Wen's speed was faster than his, so he did not notice Zhuo Wen's arrival at all. But was this possible? Just now, Zhuo Wen was unable to resist his speed. How could he appear in front of him again in the blink of an eye? You just said that I can't touch you? Is that what you mean? Zhuo Wen's eyes were indifferent and the corner of his mouth revealed a trace of a sarcastic smile. It's a fluke. Qing Si muttered to himself. He stamped his feet and the thick wings on his back suddenly spread out, turning into an illusory green light as he quickly retreated. Zhuo Wen's mocking smile became even more intense. This Qing Si was really ridiculous. Comparing speed with him who had the 6 wings of gale and thunder was simply courting death. With that, Zhuo Wen stamped his feet and the 3 pairs of lightning wings on his back spread out. In an instant, he turned into a flash of lightning and swept towards the retreating Qing Si. His speed was unknown how much faster than Qing Si's. A few hundred meters away, a green light flashed, revealing Qing Si's figure. Looking around and not finding Zhuo Wen's figure, Qing Si let out a sigh of relief and whispered with a frown, that Zhuo Wen's speed is also so fast. This should be a fluke. Fluke? How stupid! A cold voice rang in Qing Si's ears, causing his whole body to tremble. He suddenly turned his head and saw Zhuo Wen standing behind him quietly, looking at him with a mocking expression. How is this possible? How can your speed be so fast? Qing Si took a few steps back and exclaimed in disbelief. Yun was too lazy to talk nonsense with him. He stamped his feet and instantly appeared beside Qing Si. His right hand suddenly stretched out and a golden light flashed, blasting towards Qing Si. Qing Si's eyes were gloomy. His hands turned into dragon claws and met the attack. He knew that since Zhuo Wen's speed was faster than his, blindly retreating would not help at all. He might as well go all out. Boom! A fist against a pair of claws. Suddenly, a terrifying golden light burst out. The green light and the golden light confronted each other, and for a moment, they were actually evenly matched. Is this all you've got? You're really too weak. Zhuo Wen smiled coldly. His other 7 arms suddenly hammered down, and a terrifying force burst out, smashing into the 2 dragon claws in front of him. Instantly, the pair of dragon claws were smashed into pieces. Even Qing Si's arms were smashed into pieces by the terrifying force. Ah! With a miserable howl, Qing Si let out a heart-wrenching cry and retreated again and again. His arms were empty, and blood gushed out like a fountain, forming a bloody rain below. Zhuo Wen stepped forward and instantly arrived in front of Qing Si. He grabbed him with his right hand and said indifferently, "Trash that can't withstand a single blow." As he spoke, he carried Qing Si with one hand and came to Lu Nanshan's corpse on the ground. He threw it to the ground and said coldly, "Kneel." Qing Si's face was as pale as snow. When he heard Zhuo Wen's words, he gritted his teeth and said nothing. Not going to kneel? Zhuo Wen's right hand turned into a claw and grabbed Qing Si's right knee. With a crack, the kneecap was crushed, causing Qing Si to involuntarily kneel on the ground with his right foot. "Jun, what do you want?" Qing Si roared. "What do I want? You killed Marky Lu, and you're asking me what I want?" Zhuo Wen's eyes were cold and merciless. His right claw reached out again and crushed Qing Si's left knee. Qing Si immediately knelt on the ground, his face contorted in pain and his eyes full of resentment. Zhuo Wen's ruthless behavior immediately stunned many people. Qing Si was an Azure Dragon Guard, but he was easily captured by Zhuo Wen and forced to kneel in front of Lu Nantian. How strong was Zhuo Wen? "Brother Lu!" The culprit who killed Marquis Lu will be dealt with by you. Zhuowen's eyes focused on Lu Yitao as he spoke. Bastard! Lu Yitao roared and immediately rushed forward. His right hand pressed on Qing Si's ribs. With a crack, Qing Si's ribs were broken. Qing Si looked up and groaned in pain. The pain of broken ribs was not easy to bear, especially when Lu Yitao was extremely ruthless. He did not break Qing Si's ribs at once, but slowly, making Qing Si feel even more pain. Chapter 790. Qing Er and Qing San. Qing Si screamed in agony. LV Yitao was not in a hurry to kill him. Instead, he continued to crush all the bones in Qing Si's body, causing him unbearable pain. Kill me! Kill me now! Qing Si screamed. He couldn't bear LV Yitao's torture anymore. It was too painful. Kill you? It won't be that easy. LV Yitao's eyes were red. He didn't slow down and continued to crush all the bones in Qing Si's body. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Two more figures appeared. Qing Er and Qing San leisurely arrived in the air above the empty space. Qing Si has been chasing them for a while now. He should be able to finish off Zhuowen now. Qing Er said coldly. Looking at the direction they went, it should be near here. I wonder if the battle is over yet. Qing San nodded. His expression did not change at all. Although Zhuo Wen's name was well known in the imperial capital, he was only a half-step mystique venerable rank. On the other hand, Qing Si was a peak mystique venerable rank. The two of them did not think that Qing Si would lose. Ah! A blood-curdling scream suddenly rang out, causing Qing Er and Qing San to stiffen. They naturally recognized this voice. Wasn't it Qing Si's voice? That's Qing Si's voice. Is he in trouble? Qing San asked in surprise. Qing Er narrowed his eyes and said coldly, Let's go. Let's go take a look. With the guidance of the scream, they quickly arrived in the air above the empty space. They were shocked to find Qing Si kneeling on the ground with his arms crippled. There was also a young man who was extremely ruthless. He kept hitting Qing Si's body. Every time he hit, the sound of bones breaking could be heard. It was obvious that this young man had broken all the bones in Qing Si's body. Kill me! Kill me now! Qing Si screamed. He was in so much pain that he wished he was dead. LV Tao's face was cold and indifferent. He didn't care about Qing Si at all. His actions were direct and efficient. He wanted Qing Si to suffer a fate worse than death. He wanted him to regret killing LV Nantian and make him regret living in this world. Stop! Seeing Qing Si's miserable appearance, Qing Er and Qing San both roared loudly. Their eyes were red as they rushed towards LV Tao, wanting to stop LV Tao from continuing. Rumble! A golden figure suddenly soared into the sky and slammed into Qing Er, causing Qing Er to retreat dozens of meters in the air. At the same time, rays of cold sword light flashed out from the golden figure and shot towards Qing San. They blocked Qing San's dive and caused Qing San to stop in his tracks. Your opponent is me. Don't pick the wrong opponent. Zhuowen stood in the air and stared indifferently at Qing San and Qing Er in front of him with a grave expression. Qing Er and Qing San were both stronger than Qing Si. Qing Er was at the early stage of the sovereign realm, while Qing San was at the half-step sovereign realm. Qing Si was killed by you? Qing Er's eyes were filled with killing intent as he coldly asked. So what if I am? So what if I'm not? Zhuowen said indifferently. It doesn't matter. Anyway, I know that you're going to die today. Qing Er roared as he took a step forward and instantly flew towards Zhuowen. Unknowingly, a long spear had appeared in his hand. It was flickering with a cold light and was bone-chilling. Zhuowen did not hesitate and immediately took out 8 long spears from his spiritual ring. He waved them in the air and formed 8 spear intent domains around his body. Countless spear shadows were like small tadpoles that constantly swam around him. Bang, bang, bang. Instantly, Zhuo Wen and Qing Er began to exchange blows. Sparks accompanied by the sound of metal colliding unceasingly flew out. The two of them were actually evenly matched for a moment. Zhuowen is so strong. Qing Er is at the early stage of the sovereign realm, but he's actually evenly matched with him. Not far away, Qing San, who was trapped by the greater limitless sword array, looked at Zhuan, who was evenly matched with Qing Er. His eyes narrowed as he revealed a trace of shock. At this moment, Elvitao had also stopped his actions as he looked at the fierce battle in the sky. His face was filled with worry. That Zhuan is dead for sure. Qing Er and Qing San are much stronger than me. It's impossible for this kid to fight the two of them alone. Kid, I advise you to let me go quickly. Maybe I'll leave you with an intact corpse. Looking at Qing Er and Qing San, who were rushing towards him, Qing Si's eyes reignited with hope. His attitude unconsciously became arrogant and haughty. Idiot! It's better for you to die. Elvitao's gaze turned cold as he suddenly pressed down with his right hand. Under Qing Si's horrified gaze, his hand fiercely smashed into Qing Si's forehead. The latter did not even make a sound as he died with blood flowing out of his 7 orifices. Brother LV, take the people of Muqing County and leave this place. You're too weak. If you're captured by the people of the Blue Dragon Hall, I'll be in a very passive position. After LV Itao killed Qing Si, Zhuan's voice suddenly resounded in his mind. It turned out that Zhuan had sent a message to him. LV Itao's gaze flickered as he sent a message. Yun, be careful. After speaking, LV Itao walked towards Qing Lian, Luo Xing and the others as he briefly explained Zhuan's intentions. The geniuses of Muqing County basically did not have any objections. Most of them were only at the ultimate 5-wheel emperor stage and below. To the cultivators of the Xuanzun realm, they were basically ant-like existences. Staying here would undoubtedly become a burden to Zhuan. Therefore, choosing to leave now and avoid the people of the Blue Dragon Hall was the wisest choice. Although Luo Xing and Qing Lian were reluctant to part with Zhuan, they understood the bigger picture. After reluctantly looking at Zhuan's back, they followed behind LV Tao and quietly left the intoxicated spring pavilion. With Qing Si's death, Qing Er and Qing San's expressions became even more unsightly. The 4 great Azure Dragon Guards had worked together for many years and had gone through life and death together. Their friendship was as tenacious as brothers. Now that Qing Si had died, how could they not be furious? Yin, if it weren't for the Hall Master's orders, I would definitely kill you. But don't worry, even if I can't kill you, I can still completely cripple you and torture you until you wish you were dead. I'll avenge Qing Si. Qing Er roared as he fiercely brandished the azure spear in his hand. Countless afterimages formed in front of him and completely enveloped Zhuan's figure. Under Qing Er's attack, Zhuan retreated step by step. His eyes narrowed slightly. It seemed that the strength of a supreme being cultivator was indeed much stronger than that of the Xuanzun realm. Even if Zhuan used his 4 heads and 8 arms, he was still suppressed. Qing San, hurry up and break out of the formation. Let's capture this little bastard together. Qing Er roared. His attacks weren't slow in the slightest. Every move was aimed at Zhuan's vital points, causing Zhuan to be exhausted from running for his life. Within the boundless sword formation, Qing San nodded his head. With a stomp of his foot, endless waves of water appeared around him. These waves of water were like tsunamis in the sea as they fiercely bombarded the surrounding boundless sword formation. Rumble! In an instant, the boundless sword formation was actually broken by Qing San's waves of water. Shortly after, Qing San joined Qing Er's formation without any hesitation. With the addition of Qing San, Zhuan, who was originally under great pressure, was now at a complete disadvantage. He seemed to be in an extremely passive position. This Zhuan is going to be unlucky. With 2 great Azure Dragon Guards working together, this kid will probably have no way of escaping. Within the intoxicated spring pavilion, there were many cultivators who were looking up at Zhuan and the other 2 fighting in the sky. Especially when they saw Qing San and Qing Er working together to besiege Zhuan, they all shook their heads. Bush, bush. At the same time, 2 figures flew over from the direction of the room and stopped not far away from the open space. One of the 2 was actually the genius of Muqing County. Zhu Qi standing beside Zhu Qi was the ugly one-armed man. Especially when the 2 of them saw that Zhuan was actually fighting against Qing Er and Qing San at the same time without any signs of being defeated. Their eyes flickered as they revealed shock. Zhuowen's strength had somewhat exceeded their expectations. This Zhuowen's cultivation was only half a step into the Xuanzuan realm, but he was actually able to fight against a half-step sovereign realm and an initial sovereign realm cultivator at the same time. This was truly a little heaven-defying. Senior, don't you want to kill this Zhuowen? Now is the best time to act. Otherwise, if you're captured by the Azure Dragon Guards, you won't be able to kill him. Zhu Qi's eyes flickered as he suddenly spoke to the ugly man. Do I need you to remind me what to do? The ugly man coldly glanced at Zhu Qi, causing the latter to tremble and keep quiet out of fear. Turning his head, the ugly man's gaze focused on Zhu. His eyes were filled with chilling killing intent. He must kill this Zhuan, and he must completely obliterate him. But now wasn't the right time. He had to wait for the best time to act and kill him with a single blow. Bang, bang, bang. Qing Er and Qing San's attacks were extremely fierce. Qing Er brandished his spear while Qing San held a sledgehammer. They attacked Zhuowen from both sides, causing Zhuowen to be attacked from both sides, exhausting him to run for his life. Get out of my way! Zhuowen shouted. 4 spears in his left hand and 4 spears in his right hand burst out with terrifying spear intent. Suddenly, countless intent realms condensed and turned into 2 huge blue spears, rushing towards Qing Er and Qing San. Clang! Qing Er and Qing San's faces slightly changed. They raised their weapons and placed them in front of their bodies. Then, under the impact of the giant blue spears, they were pushed back dozens of meters. Zhuowen's arms drooped down as he panted. Just now, he had used all of his concepts, causing Zhuowen to expend a lot of energy. However, fortunately, Zhuowen's body was strong and his recovery was extremely fast. He only needed 3 breaths to recover most of his energy and continue fighting. As for Qing Er and Qing San, they had already been pushed back dozens of meters by Zhuowen. If they wanted to come back and attack Zhuowen again, they would need at least 5 breaths of time. Therefore, Zhuowen was now speeding up the nirvana of the Great Sun to quickly recover his energy. Right at this moment, a figure suddenly appeared behind Zhuowen. Zhuowen was caught off guard and stretched out a skinny right hand. The right hand was covered with sharp claws, and it was like a drill that suddenly drilled into Zhuowen's back. Chapter 791. Su Lingtian Thump. Thump. The sound of his heartbeat echoed in Zhuowen's ears. He had never expected that someone would launch a sneak attack from behind while he was fighting with Qing Er and Qing San. What was even more unexpected was that even with his physical strength, he couldn't stop the sharp claws of this person. Now, Zhuowen could clearly feel that the sharp claws were tightly gripping his heart. He had no doubt that if he dared to move, the claws would completely tear his heart apart. Zhuowen, little bastard, you didn't expect this day to come, right? A sinister voice sounded in Zhuowen's ears, causing Zhuowen to tilt his head. His gaze was gloomy as he stared at the ugly man behind him, who was neither human nor ghost. A puzzled expression appeared on his face. He was sure that he had never seen this one-armed man before. However, this man seemed to know him. Furthermore, from his tone, he seemed to know Zhuowen. Who are you? I have no enmity with you. Why are you attacking me? Zhuowen's breathing was hurried. His heart was gripped in the palm of this man's hand. The pain transmitted caused Zhuowen to break out in cold sweat. His face was as pale as snow. In particular, this man's claws were so sharp. Zhuowen had cultivated the great nirvana sun to the 4th level. His physical body was extremely tough and ordinary people wouldn't be able to pierce through it. However, the strange and ugly man in front of him was able to easily penetrate his body. Furthermore, Zhuowen also discovered that the ugly man's cultivation wasn't high. It was only about the same level as Qing Er. He should also be an early-stage sovereign realm warrior. Zhuowen was puzzled. How did this man, who was only at the early-stage sovereign realm, break through his physical defense? You must be puzzled right now. I'm only at the early-stage sovereign realm, but I can break through your physical defense. You don't know me, but I know you. Zhuowen's heart was in his hands. The hideous man wasn't in a hurry to kill Zhuowen. He wanted to see Zhuowen die in fear. Who are you? Zhuan asked coldly. Ha! How dare you ask me who I am? That's right, I've already become like this, so it's no wonder you can't recognize me. Even if Lu Hantian was in front of me, I'm afraid he wouldn't be able to recognize me. The ugly man laughed coldly as he muttered to himself. The ugly man's words made Zhuan even more confused. Who was this person? From the looks of it, he seemed to know Lu Hantian. Do you know why I was able to pierce through your body so easily? Hee, do you really think that this old man is merely at the initial stage of the supreme stage? Back then, before my cultivation dropped, I was in the Empyrean realm. In my eyes, your physical body has too many flaws. Finding a weak point to break through is entirely possible. Zhuan's heart was in his hands, so the ugly man was not very wary of Zhuan. After all, as long as Zhuan moved a little, he could immediately crush Zhuan's heart. You used to be an Empyrean? He was shocked. No wonder this person's cultivation was not high, but he could easily break through his physical body. It turned out that this person was originally an Empyrean expert, but for some reason, his cultivation dropped to the initial stage of the supreme stage. Do you still remember the house of Marquis Baichuan? Do you still remember the disciples of the house of Marquis Baichuan that were killed by you and Lu Hantian? The house of Marquis Baichuan had stood in Muqing County for nearly 1,000 years, but it was destroyed by you and Lu Hantian leading the house of Marquis Qin. Now you know who I am, right? You also know why I want to kill you, right? The ugly man's body trembled slightly, and his expression became somewhat agitated and angry. Obviously, he had thought of something bad. Su Lingtian? You are Su Lingtian? As soon as the ugly man said this, Zhuan's pupils shrank. He finally remembered this person's identity. In addition, this person only had one arm. Zhuan was sure that this person was Su Lingtun, the ancestor of the house of Marquis Baichuan. In the battle of the house of Marquis Baichuan, Su Lingtian and Lu Hantian fought. In the end, Su Lingtian was defeated and had one of his arms cut off by Lu Hantian. Blood splattered everywhere, and in the end he used the blood escape, which had great side effects, to escape death. Although Zhuan knew that Su Lingtian wasn't dead, he didn't expect that Su Lingtian would become like this. His heavenly venerate cultivation had even fallen to the initial stage of the sovereign realm. Zhuan, do you regret it? If you and Lu Hantian had not been so ruthless, this would not have happened today. Unfortunately, all of this has happened. What's the use of regretting it? So, you'd better die. Su Lingtian laughed sinisterly. The claw that reached into Zhuan's back suddenly exerted force. With a plop, Zhuan's heart was ripped out. Blood spurted out of Zhuan's body like a fountain. Zhuan's pupils shrank. He felt his chest empty. Then, a wave of dizziness hit him. He fell powerlessly and smashed into the ground. Ha! Little bastard, it's good that you died. Since you destroyed the house of Marquis Baichuan, I will make sure you die without a burial place. In the sky, Su Lingtian held the still-beating heart in his hand and laughed maniacally. His eyes were filled with delight. Sush! Qing Er and Qing San came to Su Lingtian's side. Looking at the heart in his hand and the motionless Zhuan on the ground, they said with ugly expressions, "You killed Zhuan?" Su Lingtian stopped laughing. His sinister gaze converged on Qing Er and Qing San. He said coldly, "What? Is there a problem? Don't you know that Zhuan has a high-grade dragon soul? The Hall Master has already ordered that we must capture him alive." You actually killed him in front of the two of us. You are courting death. Qing San's eyes were cold. Now that Zhuan was dead, they wouldn't be able to explain themselves. He couldn't help but point at Su Lingtian and curse. Bang! However, as soon as Qing San finished cursing, a claw instantly swept over and pierced Qing San's chest with lightning speed. Then, the claw fiercely twisted, and Qing San's heart was completely crushed under the force of the claw. Puchi! Qing San spat out a mouthful of blood. He looked at the claw that had stabbed into his chest in disbelief. He stared fixedly at Su Lingtian and said, "You actually dared to kill me? The two of you are just trash. The two of you together couldn't take down Zhuan. Now that I've killed Zhuan, you blame me. If I don't kill you, who should I kill?" Su Lingtian said sinisterly. As he spoke, he slapped his palm and completely annihilated Qing San's nascent soul. After all, Su Lingtian was an Empyrean realm expert. His cultivation surpassed Qing Er and Qing San. Even though his cultivation was on par with Qing Er, his strength far surpassed them. So, Qing Er didn't notice when Su Lingtian attacked. When he recovered from his shock, Qing San's heart had already been crushed by Su Lingtian. Bastard! You actually dared to kill a member of our Blue Dragon Hall. You are simply going against the heavens. Qing San's death deeply agitated Qing Er, causing him to roar loudly and flash towards Su Lingtian with his spear. He didn't hold back in the slightest. Your cultivations are too low. Su Lingtian shook his head. He stomped his foot and instantly avoided Qing Er's spear. After that, he stepped through the air repeatedly and transformed into an ethereal afterimage that instantly arrived behind Qing Er. Puchi. Similarly, with just one move, Su Lingtian's claw quickly reached into Qing Er's back and instantly crushed his heart. His nascent soul was destroyed, and Qing Er followed in Qing San's footsteps and slowly fell to the ground. Silence. The surroundings of the open space instantly fell into a strange silence. Everyone stared blankly at the corpses of Zhuan, Qing San, and Qing Er. For a moment, they forgot to make a sound. Originally, this was a battle between Zhuan and Qing Er and Qing San. However, they didn't expect that halfway through, this mysterious ugly man would appear in front of them. Not only did he successfully sneak attack and kill Zhuan, but even Qing Er and Qing San were instantly killed. Feeling the countless gazes around him, Su Lingtian frowned slightly and shouted indifferently, "What are you looking at? If you don't want to die, scram. Otherwise, no one will be left alive." As soon as these words came out, the surrounding cultivators scattered like birds and beasts. This ugly man was really too terrifying. Even a supreme had died in his hands, let alone them. You stay. Zhu Qi, who was originally standing not far away, also wanted to leave with the surrounding crowd. However, he was suddenly stopped by Su Lingtian. His body stiffened and he quickly smiled flatteringly. "Lord Su, I wonder why you stopped me?" Zhu Qi naturally heard the conversation between Zhuan and the ugly man clearly. He knew that the man in front of him was the ancestor of the Marquis of Baichuan, Su Lingtian, who had already been destroyed. Back then, Su Lingtian was a heavenly venerate powerhouse. Although his cultivation had dropped to the initial stage of the Supreme Being realm, his strength was still far above a Supreme Being realm powerhouse. In front of such a powerhouse, Zhu Qi was simply an ant. In a moment, Qing Yan and Qing Yi will come. You can be a witness for this old man. Just say that Ruan fought with Qing Er and Qing San and finally perished together. Do you understand? Su Lingtian said indifferently. When Zhu Qi heard this, he felt a knot in his heart. However, he had no choice but to obey Su Lingtian's words. He knew that if he dared to refuse, he would be faced with Su Lingtian's merciless claw. Su Lingtian was also very smart. He knew that if he escaped like this, it was very likely that he would arouse Qing Yan's suspicion. At that time, the Blue Dragon Hall would likely send powerhouses to capture him. If Su Lingtian still had the strength of a heavenly venerable, he would naturally not be afraid of the Blue Dragon Hall's wanted list. However, his strength was now too weak. He was only at the initial stage of the Supreme. Although he was strong, he was only comparable to a late-stage Supreme. Now that the Blue Dragon Hall had suddenly lost 3 Azure Dragon Guards, it would inevitably cause a commotion. At that time, if he just left like this, he would inevitably be remembered by the Blue Dragon Hall. It was better to stay here openly and firmly believe that Zhuan, Qing Er, and Qing San perished together. The people around the open space had basically all left. Only Su Lingtian and Zhu Qi were still standing silently in the same place. Su Lingtian deliberately dressed himself in a sorry state to show that he had just fought a great battle. Whoosh whoosh. After a while, 2 more figures flew out from the Shuiyu area. These 2 figures were naturally Qing Yan and Qing Yi. At this moment, Qing Yan's hands were already able to move freely. However, if he wanted to use Yuan Li, it was still far from enough. He would need to recuperate for a period of time to completely recover. Thinking about his arms that were almost crippled, Qin Yan's resentment towards Zhuowen became even more intense. He wished that Zhuowen would die without a burial place. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.